Story 1.
Husband discovers wife cheating in Paris and exposes her affair with evidence and photos. Be prepared served as the Boy Scouts' motto. The Scouts' code differed, emphasizing qualities such as trustworthiness, loyalty, helpfulness, friendliness, courtesy, kindness, obedience, cheerfulness, thriftiness, bravery, cleanliness, and reverence, along with seemingly contradictory traits of naivety, stupidity, idiocy, and trust. Surprisingly, these aspects coexisted seamlessly. Nick had no other answers. Typically, he refrained from inspecting anything on his wife's iPhone, a practice she acknowledged. Consequently, she neglected extra security measures. Being a Boy Scout, Nick upheld honesty and avoided invading privacy. However, with his wife heading out of town soon, he sought her hotel's name, aiming to avert a potential disagreement arising from his forgetfulness, a recurring issue lately. Post their wedding 5 years ago, this impending trip marked their lengthiest separation. Nick contemplated a romantic gesture, like sending flowers to express his love while she was in the romantic city of Paris. Yet his plans were disrupted by the realization that Dwayne, not he, was the one she would be sharing this experience with. Entering his wife's phone code, their wedding date, Nick found himself perusing work-safe emails exchanged between Linda and Dwayne. Their discussions included a nighttime stroll down the Champs-Élysées and then a moonlit boat ride on the Seine. Almost as surprising as the affair itself was the fact that Nick's wife Linda and her lover Dwayne exchanged messages using their work email accounts. She should have known better, so should Dwayne. Like Nick, Linda was a lawyer. Dwayne worked as a paralegal at Linda's firm. All three, Nick, Linda, and Dwayne, had experienced enough document handling and major litigation where huge teams of lawyers and paralegals read each of the hundreds of thousands of emails received or considered as part of document discovery. There was always a story about an affair by one or two idiots, and then the lawyers would try to figure out if the affair was relevant, and if so, how to limit damages. Nick didn't really pay attention to what Linda had told him about the trip and the name of the hotel where the team would be staying, because something funny was going on. At that moment, Nick didn't know what it was, but instinct made his hair stand on end. 5 years as a lawyer, listening to clients lie and listening to lawyers carefully avoid lying by not telling everything, had made his listening skills sharp. Something was wrong when Linda initially told him about the trip, a very boring arbitration case that would keep them so busy they wouldn't even be able to enjoy the sights. She said it without looking at him at all, and a little too flippantly. She knew Paris was one of Nick's favorite cities, and they always talked about going together because Linda had never been there. Nick discovered her response to be peculiar, but the worst-case scenario had not even crossed his mind yet. The content of the email he was presently reading seemed like a direct stab into his heart. Dwayne had suggested the idea of letting go of the Boy Scout for them to spend more time together without worry. Linda expressed that she felt safe with him. Nick questioned her about deceiving him behind the Boy Scout's back, making him excited and uncertain about what to do. Nick decided to print the email on the Wi-Fi printer in the basement, just in case. As a seasoned lawyer, his initial task was to preserve the evidence by printing the letter and placing it in his computer bag. Nick took a moment to think. He was certain about what he wanted to do. In his view, he had a win-win option: feign readiness to kiss her, then abruptly collide with a tree in the woods behind the house. Dwayne, on the other hand, would face less mercy. Before causing damage, Nick needed to think, and thinking was what defined him as a lawyer. He was paid to utilize his brain, not his muscles, and he had to think quickly because Linda had gone for a run and would return soon. Before he could delve into his thoughts, he had to complete his assignment and find the hotel, not to send flowers. He wasn't sure why he needed that information, but he sensed a purpose. Le Trocadero fell near the Trocadero, across the river from the Eiffel Tower, a 5-minute walk from the International Chamber of Commerce, where Linda and Dwayne would be working on their arbitration case with the rest of the team. During the lovers' free time between hotel rendezvous, he had to conduct a quick computer search on Virginia's divorce laws, drawing from his bar exam days 5 years ago. It was always good to check. Infidelity was grounds for divorce and could impact matters like alimony and property division. However, there were objections to the charge of infidelity, one being condonation. The defense was to discover the infidelity and then willingly resume conjugal relations and continue living together. Hence, he needed to leave the house promptly. Confrontation, not yet. His plan was to unleash total shock and awe on her with no uncertainties. He aimed to dominate the battlefield to end this marriage, even if it meant lying. It conflicted with Scout law, but this was war after all. Churchill stated, "In war, truth is so valuable that it must always be accompanied by a bodyguard of lies." Nick's lies now served a more critical purpose. None of them were under oath anyway. He went up to the bedroom, swiftly packed, and placed the suitcases by the front door. Just as he gathered the necessary paperwork, bank and credit card statements, 401k and IRA accounts, car papers, paycheck statements, mortgage statements, and Linda's latest student loan balance. She returned from her run, and he heard her in the kitchen. As he ascended from his basement office upon observing her drinking Gatorade, he decided to feign concern, appearing out of place despite her looking good with shoulder-length brown hair and a ponytail. He came to the realization that love was dead. He conveyed the news of going to Paris with a grim smile. Linda's face lost its color, and her blue eyes paled in response to his announcement. She quickly regained composure, asking if it was Paris, Virginia. Nick explained that Sven had called, informing him about testifying in his insurance case and the need to prepare a witness. He mentioned the complications arising from losing a motion to compel, causing chaos in the court's schedule. Nick anticipated being on the road for a few weeks, with the possibility of stopping by to do laundry from time to time. Linda, adopting a suitably concerned expression, remarked sympathetically, suggesting that maybe his firm was recruiting. Nick expressed a preference for her version of Paris. Linda, noticing worry returning to his face, then smirked, teasing him to send her a resume, hinting at the possibility of considering him for a job. It was a playful jab, considering Linda's law school ranked higher academically than Nick's. Perhaps feeling guilty, she gestured as if about to hug him. But Nick turned and headed down to his office before she could close the gap. The visions of him punching her in the face resurfaced, and he wasn't sure he could keep them under control. Rising, Linda inquired about his dinner preferences. He informed her that he couldn't stay and would grab something on the road, mentioning Sven's excitement and eagerness for him to hit the road immediately. He spoke while walking through the kitchen, and Linda followed him to the door, appearing a bit worried. As he took the suitcases and headed for the exit for a goodbye kiss, she pressed her lips together, expressing regret that she might have a cold, citing a sore throat in the afternoon. Linda followed him to the car as he loaded it up. He answered her question about his return, stating that it probably wouldn't be until Friday at the earliest. After Paris, they were heading to Roanoke, and the following week they had to go to Baltimore. Noticing a change in Linda's demeanor, he thought she might be growing more paranoid. He observed her staring off into the distance, as if calculating the unexpected possibilities his absence would open up. He waved goodbye and drove away from the driveway, hoping she'd assume he was busy with work and annoyed at being called in on a Saturday. His acting skills weren't capable of much more than that right now, but he suspected she was already planning to ask Dwayne out. Nick drove until he reached the nearest shopping center with a coffee shop. Like most lawyers, he thought better on paper. Sipping his coffee, he began making a list of cases. He paused for a moment to realize that he had never once thought about reconciliation. It wasn't even an option. Retribution would be inevitable, the only question was the degree. He was interrupted by the phone ringing, and upon not recognizing the number, he impatiently answered. The caller introduced himself as Sam Granger, explaining that he obtained the number from old real estate records. Granger quickly got to the point, stating that he was in the business of buying old houses to tear them down and build McMansions. He acknowledged the general disapproval of his work, but noted that people tended to dislike him less when presented with a check. Nick didn't have much time to react, only thinking about how the house wasn't old but cozy. He wondered why Granger was talking about tearing it down. However, his rational mind took over. Granger expressed his interest in buying Nick's house to tear it down, mentioning that he couldn't guarantee the timing of new construction, especially with county permits. He clarified that his profits came from renting out the new properties quickly. Despite Nick's initial surprise and confusion, he could hardly contain a Grinch-like smile at the prospect of a potentially good offer, especially if he and his wife were motivated to sell. Linda had picked out a house shortly before their wedding. It was an old ranch house, but with a nice yard that looked right out onto a patch of woods, with a creek running through it. It was close to major highways, but was quite secluded and peaceful. What finally won her over was the tree house in the yard, across from the bedroom window. She appreciated that the house was suitable for children. Nick, on the other hand, liked the price and the convenient location, being only 20 minutes from a major metro parking lot. The prospect of a 30-minute train ride to work seemed like a reasonable option for the neighborhood. Nick addressed Mr. Granger, expressing that he would be occupied with work for the next few days, making it challenging to ensure access to the property. Granger insisted on being called Sam and reassured Nick that he didn't need to see the inside, emphasizing that it was a demolition job, and he had already assessed it from the outside. Nick agreed to meet on Sunday morning, informing Sam that he would likely handle the deal closing himself by executing a power of attorney for his busy wife. Sam had no issue with this arrangement and offered to provide the necessary form. Nick noted the address and began outlining a plan. Reflecting on Linda's reliance on her Boy Scout, he pondered the irony that Lord Baden-Powell, the founder of the Boy Scouts movement, had drawn inspiration from military scouts, emphasizing skills such as stealth, cunning, and self-reliance. Considering an ambush strategy, he knocked over his empty coffee cup and went to his car for privacy. Nick dialed a number on his cell phone and then another, addressing the person who answered as Frank. He urgently requested a favor, needing it immediately. Frank Barry was a private investigator. During his 5 years as a corporate lawyer, Nick made it a habit to assist poor people with their legal problems pro bono. This aligned with his ideas of public service. Additionally, he received a per-hour fee from his firm for doing so, and real courtroom experience, something his day job usually didn't provide. One of his law school classmates recommended Frank to assist with a nasty divorce case in which a stepfather was sexually abusing his stepdaughter. Frank's evidence allowed him to apprehend a boyfriend when the sluggish police response failed. Thanks to that evidence, the divorce case was resolved promptly. Frank listened attentively as Nick explained what he had learned. He inquired if Nick believed his wife would invite the other person into her bed that night, and commented on her perceived brazenness and arrogance. Highlighting her academic achievements, Frank expressed his determination to handle the situation himself and conveyed gratitude to Nick, mentioning the positive publicity the Rivera divorce case had brought him. Nick acknowledged Frank's words, expressing appreciation. He then informed Frank about a house in the backyard that might be useful for his purposes. Nick described how it opened right into the bedroom, where Linda liked to practice martial arts with the curtains open. He shared that there was a way to access it by going through the woods and jumping over the creek after dark, with no fences or dogs. Nick provided details about a service road on the other side where one could park, expressing his thanks. Nick suggested placing a camera outside aimed at the front of the house to monitor the comings and goings. Nick and Frank discussed using Harry for a divorce, with Nick confirming that he indeed wanted a divorce. Frank acknowledged Nick's decision and mentioned being familiar with how Harry preferred to have the affidavit and report done. He expressed confidence that they would find out the truth soon. After the conversation with Frank, Nick reached out to Harry. Harry initially thought it was about the law school reunion, but quickly realized it was something else. Nick clarified that he wanted to hire Harry because Linda was cheating, and he wanted to take legal action. After bringing Harry up to speed on the situation, Harry suggested that Nick come back the next day, despite it being Sunday. Harry had some paperwork to deal with at the office and planned to stop by. He proposed starting the process and acknowledged that Nick seemed to have already addressed the issue of avoiding infidelity. Nick informed Frank that Harry was dealing with clear and convincing evidence, highlighting the challenge of the financial settlement, as Linda, being a lawyer at a large firm, had the resources to prolong the case with the support of her colleagues. Despite this, Nick assured Frank that he would handle the situation and believed they could settle it amicably. In the next conversation, Nick spoke with Harry, expressing the intention to settle the matter civilly rather than seeking vengeance. Harry acknowledged Nick's approach and agreed to see what he could come up with. Nick's final call was to Maggie. The initial silence was palpable. Nick explained that he needed her help regarding Linda's infidelity. He apologized for past mistakes, acknowledging their affair and letting Linda cut Maggie out of his life. Despite Nick's emotional plea, he left Maggie to process his request. Eventually, she agreed to help, expressing gratitude for Nick's ability to make her laugh. She even teased him about meeting her new partner and proposed a dinner date when the dust settled. He needed somewhere to hide out for a while and make a plan of action, so he found an extended stay hotel outside the Beltway in Fairfax, far enough away from the usual places he and Linda frequented that he wouldn't be spotted. Settled in, he went to get some food. He wasn't particularly hungry, but he knew he needed something in his stomach to digest the drinks he was about to drink. The restaurant, called El Mariachi, was across the street from the hotel. It would be enough because the free chips and cheese would just make him sick. As the hostess sat him down in a booth, he saw the bartender looking at him. He seemed vaguely familiar, but Nick put the thought out of his mind. He had enough to worry about at the moment. To see pupusas on the menu meant that the restaurant was a Central American establishment pretending to be Mexican. Most Americans didn't know the difference. Along with his meal, he ordered some cheap tequila. He knew the next day's hangover would be brutal, but he considered the pain part of the rite of passage. The waitress returned with a bottle of excellent top-shelf tequila and a highball glass. When Nick looked up at the waitress, she merely pointed to the bartender, who saluted him. Nick accepted the greeting and poured himself a generous portion as the bartender went back to serving other customers. It took a moment, but Nick remembered who he was. He remembered that the bartender was one of the people who had attended Rivera's divorce hearings and the criminal trials Nick had attended. He always sat in the last row by himself, no one ever sat next to him. Once his client Sonia's daughter hugged him, but when Nick asked Sonia who it was, she remained silent and said he was just a family friend. Nick ate in silence, making notes in his notebook and drinking tequila. When the waitress cleared away the dirty plates, he went to the bathroom. He felt like everything around him was moving, like on a ship. When he walked, he needed to lean against the wall while he went about his business. Then he went back to the booth, trying to keep steady, and found the bartender sitting in his booth on the opposite bench. The person, addressed as Senor Nick, warmly greeted him, expressing gratitude for Nick's assistance. In helping his cousin end a problematic marriage, Nick attempted to downplay his role, but the bartender persisted, sharing that the cousin's ex-husband had suffered severe beatings in prison, resulting in the belief that he might never walk or eat solid food again. The bartender disclosed this information with a slight smile, and Nick, feeling a chill, remarked that he hadn't heard about it. The bartender casually dismissed it as yesterday's news. Nick, sitting down, tried to shift the focus and asked about the bartender's curiosity regarding his presence alone at El Mariachi on a Saturday night. The bartender inquired about Nick's wife, describing her as beautiful. Nick locked eyes with the bartender, who maintained a smile. It wasn't mocking, but rather knowing. Nick couldn't fathom why the man posed such a peculiar question. How did the bartender even discern Nick's marital status? Then Nick recalled Linda surprising him at a hearing and kissing him. The bartender must have lingered in the courtroom afterward. "We had some problems with her," Nick admitted. He saw no reason to deceive or withhold information, such as her involvement with someone else. The familiar smile reappeared, rendering Nick momentarily speechless. The bartender pointed out that keeping secrets involved not writing them down and leaving the paper in plain sight, gesturing toward Nick's notebook, which contained elements related to infidelity, a sketch of Dwayne with a knife, Linda's name circled with a slash, and a to-do list mentioning "burn that pig." Nick acknowledged the lapse in operational security, but noted that he hadn't disclosed any client secrets. The bartender advised Nick to consider what he truly desired, aside from money, and suggested revenge as an option. Nick didn't hesitate, expressing a violent desire to physically damage Linda. The bartender's smile widened, and he chuckled, cautioning Nick about the legal consequences of such retaliation. He emphasized that people who act violently often end up in jail, a situation Nick would likely want to avoid unless visiting clients. Acknowledging Nick's irrational thoughts, the bartender sympathetically suggested that he might be of assistance. He referenced Nick's past help to his cousin, acknowledging that she could have asked him for help, but for various reasons she refused. Nick stepped in and resolved her issue, earning the bartender's gratitude. Nick tried to interject, sure he had Frank gather the evidence, but he had the police handle the investigation. It didn't hurt that Nick asked one of the partners in his firm, a former assistant United States attorney from the area, to have a quiet chat with the Commonwealth's attorney to ensure the criminal case was handled properly. Nick accompanied his client just to guarantee the prosecutors treated her with the respect she deserved. The bartender dismissed Nick's protests, expressing gratitude for his assistance to forgotten people like his cousin. He emphasized being indebted to Nick on behalf of his family and offered to repay his debts by providing assistance. Nick, unsure of the bartender's identity, asked for his name. The bartender revealed that some people referred to him as El Diablo or the Devil, though friends called him Jose Garcia. Nick jokingly asked if he had to sell his soul to get a favor, and El Diablo responded with a smile, calling it professional courtesy and playfully noting that lawyers have no souls. El Diablo then requested Nick's address, his wife's name, and details about her daily routine. In response, Nick inquired about El Diablo's plan, suggesting that he stay blissfully ignorant and report on his movements over the next few months. He advised El Diablo to get a cell phone for communication, leave a number at the bar, and refrain from returning to El Mariachi for the best outcome. Nick shared details with El Diablo about hiring a private investigator, his plan to remain at home until Linda's departure for France, and provided information about Linda's travel plans. El Diablo, aware of the Paris hotel location without disclosing how he knew, posed a question to Nick. He inquired about the possibility of reconciliation, forgiveness, or mercy, emphasizing the importance of resolving any doubts. The smile on El Diablo's face gave way to a serious expression as he awaited Nick's response. Nick, maintaining eye contact, took a deep breath and expressed his simple values of trust and loyalty. He admitted that his marriage lacked these values with Linda, triggering a transformation in his feelings from love to hate. Although he expected indifference to develop with time, that moment had not yet arrived. El Diablo, after hearing Nick's sentiments, reassured him that there was no chance for reconciliation. He concluded the conversation by telling Nick not to worry about a thing. The waitress brought the bill and El Diablo dismissed her, letting Nick tip generously. He also allowed Nick to take a bottle of tequila, but advised him to take his time, needing sharpness for the upcoming battle. Surprisingly, waking up without much of a hangover on Sunday morning, Nick arrived at Harry's law office at 10 a.m., where he found Frank already present. Apologizing, Frank informed Nick that Linda was engaging in lovemaking activities with another man in his bed. Despite receiving a video copy, Nick was cautioned by Harry against watching it. Harry intervened, advising Nick against any reckless actions. Nick, assuring Harry, mentioned that he followed Harry's earlier suggestion to climb into the treehouse, obtaining clear shots of their faces and evidence of their physical interactions. He described the situation as merely a physical phenomenon, with the two hardly engaging in conversation, just having fun like rabbits. Nick wasn't sure if this revelation would alter their plans. Harry, responding negatively, inquired about the details. Nick spared him the specifics but mentioned the high stamina of both individuals involved. Harry expressed his gratitude, albeit with a tinge of regret. Nick, in turn, apologized for sharing the information. Harry proceeded to reveal that Linda personally attended Nick's party last year, and they identified the man involved as Dwayne Martin, a colleague of hers. Although they couldn't determine the duration of their affair, they had clear and convincing evidence, including camera footage of their comings and goings. Harry assured Nick that he would email a link to the live feed on their secure server, and mentioned that he would draft a report and supporting affidavit. Harry apologized once again, acknowledging Nick as a friend. After shaking hands with Harry and Nick, Frank left the office. Harry then inquired about Nick's plans, and Nick expressed the intention to file for divorce based on grounds of infidelity, without directly filing against Linda. Harry looked at Nick without displaying any particular emotion. Nick assured Harry that he didn't want him to do anything reckless and believed the process would go more smoothly than expected. Harry grimaced at the suggestion. Nick continued, advising Harry to file the divorce case on Monday afternoon, just before the clerk's office closed. He requested Harry to inform him of the case number, assuring that he would handle the rest. Nick reminded Harry that he didn't practice criminal law well and wouldn't be able to assist if Nick encountered legal trouble. "You'll be pleasantly surprised," Nick declared as he exited. His next destination was a meeting with Sam Granger, proving highly productive. Nick discovered they could sell the house for over $100,000 million more than the mortgage, without a real estate agent's commission. Linda would be delighted. Nick pledged to have the necessary paperwork ready for a swift deal closure. Exiting Sam's office, Nick checked his phone, no messages or calls. She must still be enjoying time with Dwayne. Nick took the chance to urgently request 2 weeks of vacation or he would quit, leaving his boss, Sven, in a panic. Luckily, Sven granted the request, given a temporary lull in business. With the groundwork laid, Nick returned to the hotel to focus on the real work. By Monday evening, he was prepared. Throughout Sunday night and Monday, Linda left unanswered voicemails. Nick conserved his energy for Tuesday morning. Thanks to Frank's front-facing camera, Nick knew Dwayne spent Monday night there, likely leaving for work around 8 a.m. Linda would depart around 8:30 a.m. So at 7 a.m., Nick walked in yelling, "Honey, I'm home." Upon hearing brisk footsteps upstairs, Nick observed Linda, who appeared disheveled and shocked as she descended in her robe. Linda greeted him with attempted cheerfulness, expressing surprise and panic. Nick, maintaining a cheerful tone, apologized for not returning her calls, attributing it to the demands of being on the road. Disregarding the wine glasses, he headed to the dining room, and Linda, unsure of how to prevent him from reaching Dwayne, stood in the doorway. A knock on the door caught Linda off guard, and Nick asked her to answer it as he spread papers on the table. Linda opened the door, expecting a bailiff with divorce papers. Instead, Maggie entered and greeted with a simple, "Hi." Linda watched curiously as Maggie unpacked her briefcase at the dining table. Nick, feigning sincerity, apologized to Linda, expressing the need for a renewed power of attorney due to potential financial or medical issues during their travels. He also mentioned an offer to refinance his mortgage and apologized for the short notice. Linda, after some initial tension, inquired about Maggie. Nick introduced her as Maggie, and Linda visibly relaxed. Despite having a lover hidden upstairs, she felt events weren't entirely out of control. With a smirk, Linda referred to Nick as her Boy Scout, emphasizing his readiness and claiming it was just the way she was, though her eyes remained wary. Handing Linda a pen, Nick began rearranging papers in front of her, explaining that the check marks with arrows indicated where she needed to sign. Linda, expressing trust, responded with a wide smile and promptly signed all the papers in front of her. He hoped that was the case because otherwise he wasn't going to get anywhere, but he who dares wins, as they say. While Linda signed each document, Nick organized them and handed them to Maggie, who lined them up and notarized them. "Mrs. Buford, do you have a photo ID?" asked Maggie. Linda got up from the table to find her purse. Maggie and Nick exchanged glances, but both had to quickly lower their eyes to the table to keep from laughing. Linda brought her driver's license to the table. Maggie took a picture of it with her phone and wrote the information in her notary journal. Linda offered coffee, but both Nick and Maggie declined. While Maggie recorded the notarized documents in her journal and Nick sorted everything into different folders, Linda looked up, expecting Nick to attempt something and calculating her next move. Maggie left, stowing away all the tools, and smiled at Nick when Linda wasn't looking. Nick gave Linda a break, stating that he needed to have a teleconference and would go down to his basement office to do so. Linda's shoulders relaxed. For now, she would have time to escort Dwayne out the door and erase any trace of his presence before Nick reappeared from his man cave. Nick went downstairs to give her the illusion that she was still fooling him. He pretended not to hear Dwayne's heavy footsteps descending the stairs or the sound of the garage door opening so Dwayne's car could pull out. But upon hearing the sound of the shower running in the master bath, Nick gathered everything he had, walked out the basement door, and left in his car, without a word to his loving wife. 2 hours later, after a hearty breakfast at the diner, Nick was in Harry's office. Harry appeared shocked as Nick explained that he had managed to get the wife to sign Form CC-1146, agreeing to the service of the divorce petition on her and waiving service of court notices and notices of any future proceedings. Harry examined the properly notarized form that Nick presented, and Nick confirmed that it was indeed signed. Harry sought clarification, asking if Nick had also persuaded his wife, an experienced attorney, to sign a property division agreement. This agreement included provisions such as giving Nick all the proceeds from the sale of their house and its contents, the cars, and Linda's jewelry. Additionally, it granted Nick full discretion over the disposition of Linda's personal belongings and allowed both of them to walk away with their respective retirement accounts, with no alimony in Linda's favor. Nick affirmed these details, emphasizing that Linda, who earned more money than him, willingly agreed to leave the marriage with approximately $125,000 in retirement contributions and about $200,000 in undergraduate and law school debt, according to the documents. Harry, seemingly skeptical, remarked that Linda had a generous nature. Harry then turned his attention to the affidavit Nick claimed Linda signed, admitting to cheating and acknowledging the presence of her lover in the marital bedroom at the time of signing. Nick confirmed these details and referenced an email correspondence where Linda discussed staying with her lover because he aroused her. Nick, showing no visible emotion, asserted that the documents spoke for themselves. Harry glanced at the papers, looked up at Nick, and started to smile, but suppressed it. Twisting in his chair, he expressed frustration, mentioning his intention to file all the presented documents. Harry, feeling embarrassed, acknowledged Nick as a respected member of the bar and a friend from law school. He admitted being unaware that Nick was fabricating the situation and stated that everything appeared fine to him. Harry, addressing the court, suggested disbarment for Nick, emphasizing the violation of trust by his client. Nick, understanding the situation, inquired about the notary's potential role as a witness if needed. Harry confirmed that the notary could testify that Linda signed the documents and might mention seeing her scrutinize them. However, Harry refrained from providing an opinion on Linda's understanding of the document contents. Nick agreed to the plan, and Harry mentioned that he would file all the documents, including Frank's affidavit and report, which contained attached photos and a DVD. Harry intended to keep it out of the electronic file temporarily to prevent it from making the news. Nick emphasized the importance of keeping things quiet, considering Linda's impending departure for Paris in a little over 2 weeks. He asked if Harry knew anyone at the county courthouse. Harry mentioned Seth, a day student from the year after them, currently clerking at the county courthouse to build up his resume. Harry believed Seth might be able to expedite the process, but he cautioned that if the judge wanted live testimony, the entire plan could collapse and Linda would need to make a decision. Nick informed Harry that Linda did not want to contest the case on fraud once she understood the situation. He mentioned that if things took a negative turn at that stage, he might have to let go of Harry's services, to which Harry agreed. Nick expressed a desire to hear the full story someday, but conveyed his reluctance to discuss it at the moment. Over the next 2 weeks, Nick successfully maintained a distance from Linda. He sent her text messages at off hours, letting her know how busy he was, but he answered her calls the rest of the time. Over time, she began to call less frequently. "You scared the hell out of her," Frank told him at the end of the week. "Judging from the videotape, Dwayne hasn't been in the house once since you showed up and surprised them Tuesday morning," I can't tell if they're meeting at his place during the week or having fun with each other at the office, but they're not doing it in the house. I'll tell you if anything changes." The only thing that had changed was that Nick had quietly returned to the house when he found out Linda was gone and had taken the financial papers he thought he might need. He also signed a contract to sell the house to Sam Granger. The transaction was to take place during Linda's first week in France. The rest of the time, Nick went to the gym, did some leisure reading, and pondered how he had gotten to the point where he was 30 years old, with his life in such disarray. He told Sven that he needed a few more weeks off, and Sven reluctantly agreed. "She's having fun with him at the house again," Frank said Saturday, a week before Linda was scheduled to leave for Paris. "Thanks for the heads up," Nick replied. He didn't care, but he knew that once he got rid of the house, he'd rather burn the sheets than sell them. By this time, Nick had watched the video that Frank had given him. The first time, he realized his attraction. Dwayne was a couple of years younger, and, as Frank's investigation had revealed, the guy was a gym rat, constantly pulling himself up in front of the mirror after weight training. Otherwise, he was unremarkable. In comparison, Nick was in reasonable shape but didn't boast a tight belly. Linda seemed to be seeking arm candy, a trait Nick could do without. Before he knew it, Linda embarked on her eagerly anticipated trip to Paris. A member of Frank's team followed her to the airport during her departure to Europe. Upon receiving the news, Nick went to the house, piled all of Linda's clothes in the living room, and packed up his belongings. The next day, movers arrived, packing Linda's items separately and sending them to storage. They also packed Nick's things and moved them to the apartment he found with Sam Granger's help. Nick easily sold the furniture, thanks to Sam's reselling skills. Once the house was empty, Nick did a final walkthrough before taking one last action. He carefully collected wedding photos, the album, and Linda's wedding dress. He brought them to the fire pit under the treehouse on the patio, placed them atop embers, added lighter fluid to the dress, and lit a match. As everything burned, Nick was pleased with the level of detail captured in the video, even discerning details in each photo as it joined the flames. A day later, Nick closed the sale of the marital home, using Linda's power of attorney to sign on her behalf, a move she should have scrutinized with a separate financial power of attorney. Nick deposited the house sale profit into his personal account, certifying it on behalf of his wife as her attorney in fact, and closed the joint accounts. 3 days later, still in the initial week of Linda's French trip, a construction crew razed the house. Days later, they cleared the debris, starting preparations for the site. Unfortunately, the tree with the treehouse had to be removed for a planned gazebo. However, construction halted once only an empty square of land remained due to issues in the permitting process. Nick and his law school friend at the county permit office believed the problem would resolve upon Linda's return, with proper forms submitted and approved. Throughout this period, Nick ignored all of Linda's attempts to contact him, not responding to calls, emails, or voicemails. El Diablo, using the landline, informed Nick that Linda and Dwayne appeared stressed and didn't look their best, suspecting something was amiss. Nick asked how El Diablo knew, to which he simply claimed to have connections everywhere, even in Europe. El Diablo inquired if Nick wanted Linda's wedding and engagement rings, and upon Nick's refusal, asked if someone else could acquire them. Nick agreed. 2 days before Linda's return from Paris, Nick visited Harry's office, receiving an unexpectedly swift divorce decree. Seth, tight-lipped, facilitated the process, and Nick opted not to inquire further, congratulating himself on his newfound single status. Harry provided a copy to send to Nick's ex-wife, expecting her delight. As Nick was getting into his car outside Harry's office, his phone rang, receiving a call from an unfamiliar number. Nick recognized El Diablo's voice as soon as he answered. El Diablo advised Nick to take a vacation immediately, suggesting he go to a place with a lot of people who know him and can confirm his presence. El Diablo ended the call abruptly. Nick, understanding the urgency, realized he hadn't seen his college friends in New York for a while. Luckily, they had free schedules in the next few days. That afternoon, he hopped on Amtrak, attended shows, explored museums, and shared meals with friends, most of which he paid for with a credit card. Nick also tipped generously at the hotel to ensure the staff knew who he was during his stay. He express-mailed a DVD copy of him burning Linda's wedding dress and album to Linda's parents' home. Late one Sunday night, while savoring coffee and cake at Little Italy in Manhattan, Nick received a call from his father-in-law. His father-in-law informed him that Linda was in the hospital and going through a difficult time. Nick inquired about the reason behind her condition. His father-in-law explained that Linda had returned from a business trip on Friday and, along with a colleague, had been kidnapped at the airport. They were medicated and only managed to escape that morning. Unfortunately, Linda's colleague had been severely beaten. Nick could sense the emotional strain in his father-in-law's voice. Once upon a time, Nick might have felt sympathy. However, he asked about Linda's condition. The father-in-law explained that when Linda woke up, she found herself covered in tattoos with derogatory inscriptions, labeling her as a fancy woman and a strumpet. Soon after awakening and realizing this, an individual wearing a mask entered and physically assaulted her, breaking her nose and causing 2 black eyes. Nick couldn't help but be impressed by the severity of the situation. Really, it was the cherry on top of the ice cream. He would have been happy if Linda had realized that he had betrayed her in court just as she had betrayed him in marriage. But this was just a rainbow pleasure of joy. It would be worth an immortal soul if he could give it away. Expressing his condolences, Nick acknowledged that he was currently out of town and inquired about what his father-in-law would like him to do. Detecting surprise on the other end, his father-in-law emphasized that Linda was Nick's wife. Nick, without much emotion, clarified that they were divorced, and the order was issued the previous week due to Linda's infidelity with the man she was traveling with. When his father-in-law seemed confused, Nick coldly mentioned having a video of the infidelity and offered to send a copy. The revelation left his father-in-law in stunned silence. Nick, displaying a lack of empathy, stated that Linda was no longer his problem and his father-in-law would need to take care of her. His father-in-law, expressing frustration, accused Nick of causing the situation. Nick, unapologetic, explained that he had been in New York celebrating his divorce since Wednesday. He acknowledged the father-in-law's upset state and hoped for Linda's recovery, but conveyed that they had nothing more to discuss. Nick then ended the call. It occurred to Nick at that moment that the stress of city life had been too much lately. He sent Sven an email saying that Sven and the firm could go to hell respectfully after all. A quick internet search revealed that there was an REI in Soho, and Nick got himself some new hiking and camping gear. Linda had never liked camping, so this was a chance to reconnect with her scouting past. The hotel was very accommodating and agreed to leave his luggage for a while for a reasonable fee. And Nick was on his way to the Adirondack Mountains to commune with nature until things calmed down. Luckily, he had his passport with him in case he had time to travel to Canada. And it turned out he did have time. For the next 8 weeks, he kept his phone turned off. Initially, he assumed some disturbed woman had taken possession of his ex-wife's phone, given the multitude of messages, including frantic screams and cries. He listened to just a couple and deleted the rest. There were numerous crazy emails too. Her account must have been hacked. Reading through all of this seemed impossible. He hoped the troubled woman responsible would find the help she desperately needed. After 8 weeks, Nick, Frank, and Harry gathered for a drink. Harry clarified that he had terminated their ties with the attorney right after serving Nick the divorce decree, a piece of information Nick admitted to not having checked yet. As they settled at the table, Frank described the aftermath as a serious situation, likening it to a typhoon of destruction. Harry, with a sense of dark humor, found amusement in the widespread chaos. Frank began recounting the events, detailing how Linda, accompanied by her parents, had a meltdown upon seeing the vacant lot where their house once stood. Her emotional breakdown escalated as construction workers arrived, and her tattooed face became a source of laughter among them. Despite her visible injuries and the duct tape on her broken nose, the offensive tattoos on her face, neck, and arms were prominent. Harry took over the narrative, indicating that the work on her face was particularly well done, making the text highly visible on camera. The derogatory phrases included fancy woman, puta, and explicit statements about her preferences. In the afternoon, Linda, along with a couple of lawyers from prominent firms, arrived at Frank's office without an appointment. Frank deliberately made them wait for 15 minutes, ensuring that his loaded Glock was in his desk for safety, grateful for Virginia's firearm laws. Frank eventually faced their anger, enduring discussions about emergency motions, bar complaints, and contempt proceedings. Despite the tension, Frank couldn't help but be aware of the visible ink on her face, done in red and blue for maximum visibility. When he finally shifted his attention, Frank questioned the nature of their problem and challenged them to identify any false statements in the documents. The lawyers hesitated and looked at each other. Frank then asked if the dispute revolved around Linda's infidelity, to which they all affirmed. Taking control of the situation, Frank played the videotape. That had been recording while they waited. The footage clearly showed Linda engaging in lovemaking activities with someone other than her husband in the marital bed. The lawyers, caught off guard and seemingly unfamiliar with the case details, exchanged confused glances. Linda began shouting about not having a chance to explain, claiming that she never agreed to let Nick sell the house, and accused him of burning her personal belongings, including her wedding dress, pictures, and album. Frank presented copies of powers of attorney, including one for the house sale and the property settlement agreement, which granted Nick authority over her personal items. He pointed out that Linda was fortunate to still have her clothes. When Frank questioned if she contested her signature on the documents, Linda admitted to it but insisted she hadn't agreed to the contents. Frank pressed further, asking if her defense rested on not reading what she signed, and warned her about the potential consequences during cross-examination in court. Linda fell silent, and when Frank referred to the accurate affidavit she signed, admitting her lover's presence during the signing, she lost consciousness. Despite attempts to revive her, she refused to go to the hospital. Later, she complained about tattoos and her boyfriend being assaulted, to which Frank clarified that Nick was out of town and likely had no involvement. Dwayne's altercation may have been with another angered party, thinking Linda was defending him. Frank directed them to the Fairfax Police Department for criminal matters. The drama continued as they discussed filing a motion for reconsideration. Frank received an anonymous email with links to videotapes of Linda and Dwayne in Nick's bed during their escapades in front of Paris, warning of widespread distribution if she persisted. Frank informed Nick about this, stating that these were friends Nick had assisted and who pledged to protect him by activating the send button if Linda persisted. Following their departure, Frank heard nothing more from them. Nothing happened at the courthouse, and Frank suggested that they might have involved the police, who initially sought copies of the videotape and report but lost interest later. Linda and Dwayne couldn't explain the events, remembering only entering a cab at the airport, with the next memory being in the hospital. Linda woke up in a shabby hotel, endured a punch to the face, and found her way to the hospital, discovering that room charges, room service, and minibar expenses were billed to her credit card. This time, Nick disclosed that the hotel manager, along with New York police officers, had verified his stay, contacting his New York friends who affirmed his active schedule in the city. Harry shared street talk that suggested Nick's ex was hiding in her parents' basement, undergoing an expensive laser tattoo removal due to her extensive coverage. Nick expressed regret, prompting a glance from Harry and a restrained chuckle from Frank. Regarding meat eater Harry, Frank reported that he suffered severe injuries, anticipating substantial future physical therapy, with head damage and difficulty securing another paralegal job. Both were let go by their firm due to the relationship breakdown during the trip, adversely affecting the arbitration with missed details, unprepared exhibits, and issues with lost witness notes. The client expressed dissatisfaction, leading the firm to make sacrifices to retain the client for future work. Frank praised Nick, hinting at a future revelation of how he accomplished it. Nick innocently asked, "Managed what?" "I'm a Boy Scout." Maggie, waiting in the car, expressed her willingness to vouch for watching Linda review each document before signing but couldn't estimate the time spent. Nick suggested discussing over dinner and treating Maggie for helping him gain his freedom. Maggie clarified, dispelling the notion of a boyfriend, prompting Nick's surprised reaction. She directed him to take her home, ready for a lengthy apology. Nick agreed with a smile but mentioned a quick stop at the post office to send a card to a friend, featuring a Boy Scout emblem, asking if she felt safe at the moment.
Story 2.
My wife cheated with our best friend's husband, so I gave her a diamond pendant and divorce papers. I'm 57, male, married for over 3 decades to Jennifer, 51, female. We have a son and 2 daughters, all are adults now and living on their own. I work for a pharmaceutical company with a great payout. Our lifestyle has been decent, even with the single income and 3 children. Life didn't used to be that complicated earlier. A year and a half back, my company decided to set up another production unit in the neighboring town, and I was appointed as one of the core members to be leading the setup. I was leading the manufacturing department when I got the offer. I discussed it with Jenny before accepting it. All our children had moved out by then, and it was just us. I didn't want to leave her alone, but she assured me that she would manage fine. It was a temporary project until the setup was running smoothly. The company had taken a year's time for this setup completion. The pay for this duration was almost 2.5 times my current salary, which was a big deal. After measuring all the pros and cons, we decided that I would take it up. That payout would help me retire earlier, and we could enjoy the last phase of our life comfortably. Next month is my 30th anniversary, and I was planning to make it super special for Jenny. Yes, 3 decades is a milestone. Plus, I had to make up for my absence due to work commitments, so I decided to gift her a diamond pendant she has been eyeing for a long time. I went to one of the oldest jewelry shops in town. They showed me their latest and classiest collection, but I was not able to finalize one. I showed Jenny's photo to the store guy and asked him to suggest something that would suit her beauty bones. He was surprised to see her and asked me if she was my wife. I said, damn yes. He said she was their regular customer for many years and often visited the store. I said, yeah, I know. That's why I came to this shop. I asked him if there was anything else because the way he reacted didn't seem like a happy surprise. He apologized for his reaction and said, no, I wasn't expecting Jenny to be your wife. I have never seen you accompanying her, hence got confused. He was stammering at his responses, sounded somewhat not satisfied. I calmed him down and asked him what was the matter. He said Jenny had visited the store a week prior, and she had placed an order for a men's sapphire ring. He apologized to me a million times, saying he might have ruined the surprise for her. He pleaded that I act surprised when she gives me the ring, or else she might report him to the manager. And he would be fired for being a big mouth. I chuckled and asked him not to worry about it. I was over the moon thinking Jenny was equally excited about the anniversary and that she had been planning surprises for me. Next, I made the reservation for a beach holiday. I booked a resort on a private island in Miami. All the arrangements were made for an exotic holiday by the ocean. It was all a surprise. After making all the arrangements, I was waiting for the anniversary day to arrive. However, all my happiness crashed down yesterday when I saw a sapphire ring on my friend Lena's husband. Jenny, Lena, and I have been close aides for the last 30 years. Actually, we had a group of 5 close friends, but 2 of them lost touch eventually, but we 3 are still super tight. Lena has been the toughest person I have ever met. Discussing her background would have been futile here, but it holds importance in this case. Lena's father was a wealthy businessman. 3 years back, however, some of his top management guys conspired to siphon the company's money, leading to the company's shutdown due to compliance issues. Her father suffered a heart attack and got paralyzed due to that trauma. Since then, she has stepped up to take care of her parents and has been bravely fighting court cases to clean her father's reputation. Yesterday, Jenny and I visited Lena to check on her dad's condition. Everything was normal until her husband, Marcus, 52, male, arrived. I don't know if it was his flamboyant personality or the flashy ring itself that caught my attention. I couldn't pretend not to notice it and asked him about the ring. If I had not known about that ring earlier, I would have never noticed their reactions and body language. Marcus and Jenny looked at each other, and then he curled his lips with a smile and said he bought it for himself. Lena seemed to be annoyed at this. I mean, it goes without saying that she has been going through a difficult time managing her family and her parents, along with the court cases, and in that situation, her husband is spending bombs on a ring, and that too for himself. Oh yeah, one more thing. Marcus used to work at Lena's father's company, and ever since the company went bankrupt, he's been a lazy bum sucking onto her income. Now that I know the reality, that the ring was gifted by my lovely wife, makes the situation even worse. Why would she give such expensive gifts to Lena's husband without anyone knowing? There has to be something. I added 2 and 2, and now it makes sense to conclude that they are both fooling around. Now, the thing is, I just cannot confront this based on my math. I need proper evidence. I could have teamed up with Lena on this mission, but she's already going through enough, and I don't want to trouble her without evidence. I have to leave for work tomorrow, and it disgusts me to think that as soon as I leave, Marcus is going to come banging my wife. I'm going nuts thinking about the entire stuff. First, we have the loving husband planning a grand surprise for his dear wife on their 30th anniversary, diamond pendants and exotic beach holidays, oh my. But wait, a plot twist. Turns out dear wife has a little secret of her own and it's not exactly a pleasant surprise. Enter Marcus, the flamboyant ring-bearing husband of the couple's longtime friend Lena. And wouldn't you know it? He's flashing around a sapphire ring like it's going out of style. But hold your horses, folks, because it turns out that sparkly bauble wasn't a gift from dear Lena. Oh no, it was actually a little present from OP's own wife. Cue the dramatic gasps and incredulous stares. Update 1. Hey, I left the last post midway. I kinda got lost in my thoughts. I got one comment asking if I missed reading out the red flags or if there were none. Let me tell you, although I still have no information on when and how, I know for sure that their cheating game would have started after my transfer to the new plant. Lena and Marcus have been married for 6 to 7 years with no kids. I don't know what Lena saw in that lazy bum that she served him a fortune on a platter. I mean, he got an eminent position in the company without lifting his butt. After the transfer, for the first 5 to 7 months, I was mostly staying at the new manufacturing unit. The company provided us with the stay and everything. I used to drive home twice or thrice a month. Initially, Jenny was sulking and complaining about our limited couple time, but eventually that stopped. I thought she got used to the situation. It was kind of a relief for me, but now I think it was not. It was a sign of a bigger problem. Guys, making this simple for all of you, partners not complaining about the couple time is actually a red flag and not a sign of maturity. When you love and care for someone, you crave to spend time with them. After the installation of the first plant at my site, my workload got slightly easier. I was now coming home every weekend, but Jenny was still in that distant mode. I spoke to her several times regarding her changing attitude, and she pinned the blame on me. She said she wants to remain distant from me until my project concludes and I move back because it hurts her to see me leaving on Monday, after spending quality time for the weekend. Guess what? I bought her reason. It made sense to me. That's what we tend to do, blindly trust our partners, and that's how we land up here. Our sex life became non-existent for the same reason. Every time I initiated, she would snap at me, saying she doesn't want to ignite her sex life when she can't get it when she wants. Sometimes I used to get irritated by this, but she assured me that once my project was over, we'd get back to our usual routine. She was like, "You turn me horny and then you leave me alone for the whole week, and it becomes difficult for me, so I don't want to have anything at all for this period of time." And guess what? I bought this too. Want to smack my head? Me too. All this was the reason I had planned something special for this anniversary, to cover for my absence and to make her feel special. Until now, I was feeling so blessed to have such an understanding wife. I was so grateful to her for supporting me in every way. Now we know the truth behind her support. Anyways, I'm back at my plant, and I don't want to go back home anytime soon, at least not without a plan to catch her infidelity. I'm yet to work on the plan. If anyone has an idea, kindly pitch in. Would much appreciate the help. Who knew that behind the facade of marital bliss lurked a tangled web of lies, deceit, and more excuses than a politician's campaign speech? First, we have our op, the unsuspecting husband who's been played like a fiddle by the supposedly loving wife. Ah, the joys of blind trust and the crushing weight of naivety. Then there's Marcus, the lazy bum who somehow managed to luck his way into a cushy job and now, apparently, into OP's marital bed. Talk about getting more than you bargained for in the company perks package. And let's not forget dear Lena, the friend caught in the crossfire of her own husband's wandering eye. Bet she didn't sign up for this when she said, "I do." Update 2, reposting the thread again. Not sure what happened that my last update got deleted twice. I came back to my work to clear my head and to strategize next. I got the suggestion from you guys, seriously, to gather the evidence first before the confrontation. I bought some sound capturing devices with a recorder and decided to plant them at the places where they would likely meet. The following weekend, I went home. We were anyways distant from each other, sex life was null, so avoiding her wasn't a big deal. I fixed one tiny capturing device inside her clutch bag and placed the connector and recorder inside her car. 2 other devices I placed in my bedroom and one on the living room couch, hid the recorder behind the bookshelf. I tested both devices and they worked fine. After that, I patiently waited for the device to collect the relevant evidence. It was almost a week until I got some concrete recordings. Marcus hasn't visited my house in my absence, so there were no recordings with both their voices. It was just her voice on the calls. The information was in bits and pieces, but the overall crux of the conversation was that they were saying "I love you" to each other, talking about their desires and pleasures. That very weekend, Lena was to travel with her parents to their countryside farm to sort out some legal matters. Ideally, Marcus should have accompanied them, but he was more interested in using Lena's absence as an opportunity to bang my wife. He insisted that Jenny catch up on that weekend, but she refused. She said I was home and didn't want me to get suspicious of her absence. They were whining about the fact that I was visiting home more often, and they were not getting enough time for themselves. All these conversations were happening in my bedroom while I was mowing the lawn outside. Petty. They talked about this on Saturday morning and I heard it in the afternoon. I went out of the study and told her that something urgent came up at work, and I would be leaving after dinner. She nodded. After that, I was waiting for her phone call with Marcus, but the recorder didn't fetch anything. After dinner, I left. She came to see me off outside, hugged and kissed me. I wanted to push her off, but I resisted. I drove off. The recorder didn't fetch any data for a long time, and that scared me off. I thought she found it and destroyed it, but after a while, I got a notification that something was getting recorded. It was a phone call with her mom, just normal stuff, nothing alarming. I kept waiting for her to speak to Marcus and discuss their next meeting. Yeah, I was heavily preying on them. I reached my company's site and dozed off. My anxiety had torn me apart. I woke up on Sunday morning, and the first thing I did was check the data. Found it. She had called him after midnight saying she felt lonely, and they decided on meeting the next day before indulging in phone sex. It was harrowing to listen to those words. I had enough information to catch them red-handed, but their conversation didn't reveal the place. They already had a pre-decided place maybe. I noted the time they were scheduled to meet. I rushed back home, wanting to follow her car. God knows what I was thinking. I didn't even check if I'd be able to make it on time. I just rushed. I was still on my way when I got a panic call from Lena. She was driving back home with her parents when her father had another attack. The ambulance was on the way. She was desperately calling Marcus, but he wasn't responding. She called me to check if I was nearby and could come to her rescue. At that moment, I forgot about my plan and ran to help Lena. By the time I reached the hospital, her father was admitted and being treated. She broke down on seeing me. I wanted to tell her about her low-life husband, but how could I at that moment? She kept calling him, but no response. It was almost midnight when Marcus arrived after seeing Lena's voicemails. He was shocked to see me. Lena's father was out of danger by then. She was definitely mad at him, but she softened when he gave her a reason for not responding. I couldn't bear to hear his excuse. I wanted to punch him because I knew he was lying. I went back to my car and played the recorder. The mic in Jenny's wallet recorded every filthy thing these two had done that day. After a while, I saw Jenny come rushing to the hospital. She acted shocked at seeing me. I'm sure Marcus would have told her about me. She said Marcus informed her about Lena's dad, and she came to support her. She asked when I came back. Lena said that she called me when Marcus didn't respond. Jenny was like, "Hey, why didn't you call me? I was home all day, could have come with you." Look at the audacity of her lying. I excused myself and drove back to my plant. I had work the next day. I have my anniversary in 10 days, and I'm planning to gift a memoir to my wife. I'm in touch with Lena. Her dad is recovering, so hopefully I'll expose my wife and her loser affair partner in front of Lena. Alas, just when OP thinks he's got the smoking gun, fate throws a curveball in the form of a medical emergency. Talk about impeccable timing. Who knew infidelity could take such a backseat to a good old-fashioned heart attack? And let's not forget Marcus, the bumbling accomplice caught in the crossfire of his own deceit. If he's not careful, he might just find himself on the receiving end of a well-deserved beatdown, courtesy of our betrayed op. As for our leading lady, Jenny, well, let's just say her days of playing the innocent housewife are numbered. With a recorder full of incriminating evidence, her carefully constructed facade is about to come crashing down faster than a house of cards in a hurricane. Update 3: that 10-day wait period was the hardest. I wanted to get done with it as soon as possible. On the day of the anniversary, I drove back home with the diamond pendant and divorce papers. My children were home. We had planned this to be a surprise for Jenny, but after discovering the truth, all the love turned into disgust. I went home late. My children arrived with their partners. Lena and Marcus were already present. The celebration had almost begun. I wanted to blurt out the truth the moment I saw Marcus, but held it up for the sake of my children. The cake was cut and champagne was rolled out. I gave her the diamond pendant I had bought. Jenny was delighted, but when she saw the name of the shop, she turned pale and asked me, "When did I go there?" She was worried that her truth might have come out from there. Rightly so. I was quiet for most of the evening. I had texted Lena to stay back for a while. I had something to reveal after the children were gone. The children pushed off after dinner. Jenny was over the moon wearing the diamond. I told her I had something else for her. I pulled out the envelope and handed it to her. She jumped in excitement, saying, "Holiday package?" I smiled and asked her to open it. By the way, I canceled all the bookings for Miami when I got to know the truth. She opened the envelope and froze. She muttered, "This is a prank, right? You're not serious, right?" I nodded. I was serious. Lena sat there in shock. Marcus got the vibe of the situation and asked what's wrong. I played the recording tape on my phone. Jenny crashed down on the couch, burying her face and crying. The room was dead silent. Lena was in tears too, but that woman had seen so much hardship in life that she didn't mind yet another blow. She silently got up and left. Marcus followed her outside. After they left, I too started packing my stuff. Jenny came to me, crying, trying to hug me. She said, "Since you know the truth, you must know that I wanted to come out of this. I have been telling Marcus to stop this, but he insisted that we continue until you return." She was right. There were conversations where she was talking about breaking up. But Marcus was always successful in getting her on board for one last time. That's not the point, that she wanted to end it. The thing was, why did she even start? It was the same classic answer of, I was lonely, you were busy with work. First of all, cheating shouldn't be an excuse for anything. Second, I used to visit home at least twice a month, even during the initial days. Was that not enough for her to keep her legs closed? What about the women who see their husbands after months and years? Do they turn into hoes to satisfy themselves? I said I was going to head out and would wait for her to sign the papers. Meanwhile, I have a few more things to update, but that would be for later, running out of time now. Thanks for reading this thread. Forget flowers and chocolates, nothing says I love you, like a shiny diamond pendant and a side of divorce papers, am I right? But wait, there's more. It's a family affair, folks. We've got the whole gang gathered around to witness the unraveling of a marriage and the birth of a brand new single life. Update 4. Let me pick up from where I left off. That night, I packed my stuff and left the house. She pleaded with me for the sake of 30 years of marriage. She reminded me of all the tough times we had been through together, and how we had planned on spending our retirement life living in the camper by the woods. She was trying to emotionally manipulate me, and I was getting swayed by her to some extent, but I stood my ground and held my resolve. I came to my company's condo for the night. The project setup was supposed to be wrapped up in a couple of months, after which I should have been back at my house. Now, with the change in the situation, I wanted to stay away from that place. I requested my company's director to transfer me to the new site temporarily. He was curious about my request because the last time I was nagging about letting me move back, and now I wanted to extend my stay. I briefly told him about my troubled marriage. He was empathetic and asked me to take some time off to clear my mind. I said I'll take it when I need it. 2 days later, I got a call from my son asking what's wrong with Mom. He said that Jenny had been crying over the phone and asking them to come home. She didn't give them a reason, just asked him to come over along with the sisters. I called Jenny to ask what she was up to. She was bawling. She said her guilt was weighing her down and she wanted to confess in front of the children. She asked me if I could be present. I said I don't want to intervene in her plans and she could do whatever she wanted. I don't have the details of what happened at the gathering, but my elder daughter came to me after a week. She asked me if I wanted to stay with her for some time. I said I was doing fine and would visit her when I needed it. Update about Lena. I have been in touch with her. She's been battling too many battles alone. I asked her if she needed any help, and she said no, she would handle it. She had kicked out Marcus that very night. He was a leech. I have never been fond of this guy. In fact, when Lena told me that she wanted to marry him, I cautioned her. He didn't have a proper job, although he had a college degree. He had a callous attitude. He conveniently joined Lena's family business to lurk around. Then, he smartly used my absence to get into my bed. He's an opportunist, I would say. She informed me that Jenny visited her and fell on her knees asking for forgiveness. She owned up to her sin but also pinned the blame on Marcus for luring her into this. Lena believes this to be true because she has noticed Marcus ogling at Jenny multiple times even before their affair started. There were even fights between them regarding Jenny, but Marcus always assured her that he was not attracted to Jenny at all. I feel Lena got a harder blow facing the betrayal from her husband and her best friend. She's proceeding with the divorce as I update this. Her parents are supporting her through this. I know she will sail through this, for the tough woman she is. I bought a camper for myself yesterday to travel and live in whenever, to break the monotony of my condo life. I need to do some renovation to suit my comfort. Writing here has been working like therapy for me, and I will continue doing so as I move forward. Ah, the joys of marital drama and family dysfunction. OP is busy channeling his inner nomad, trading in his suburban condo for a life on the open road in his brand new camper. Who needs a stable marriage when you've got 4 wheels and a tank full of gas? Here's to new beginnings, freedom on the horizon, and the endless adventures of life after love. Who knows what the future holds, but one thing's for sure, it's bound to be one hell of a ride. What do you make of all this? Thank you for joining us today. Be sure to like and subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video. See you next time.
Story 3.
Jake had been plagued by migraines throughout his entire life, and at times, they would become incapacitating. His most recent episode occurred over a year ago, and he cherished each day without a migraine. Describing the intensity of severe migraines to someone who hasn't experienced them might be challenging, but prolonged suffering can make one yearn for an end to the pain, wishing for a peaceful departure. Although such severe migraines were infrequent for Jake, he understood the importance of heeding his body's signals and taking the necessary rest, despite being a robust, muscular man of 35 years. On a Wednesday morning, Jake recognized the familiar signs emerging: double vision, dizziness, and a slight throbbing in his head. Aware of the potential risks, he opted not to drive and arranged for a taxi to take him home. Instructing his secretary to cancel appointments for the day, he left the possibility of returning to the office tomorrow pending. Given the week-long duration of these headaches, Jake preferred not to take any chances. Upon returning home, he took 2 Dapacote tablets, grabbed an ice pack, and headed to the living room adjacent to their spacious master bedroom. In a corner chair reserved for such rare occasions, he applied the ice pack to his head, closed his eyes, and attempted to meditate mindlessly. Despite the pain intensifying, he persevered in the hope that this migraine wouldn't be as severe as feared, and he could resume normal functioning within a couple of hours. While in his meditative state, Jake heard noises below, assuming it was his wife of 10 years, Linda. Deciding to remain seated, he wasn't prepared for conversation. Linda, understanding his condition, typically gave him space and quiet when he was home during a migraine attack. However, unbeknownst to Linda, Jake's car wasn't in the driveway, and he had no reason to be home at that time since he usually arrived every night at 6. Despite blocking out the noise and focusing on controlling the pain, Jake suddenly became aware that Linda wasn't alone. Another voice, a man's voice, reached his ears. Opening his eyes, he noticed Linda and the unidentified person heading upstairs to their bedroom. Staying still and silent, he eavesdropped on their conversation. Linda, on her cell phone, was giggling and chatting with Shelley, Jake's brother Robbie's wife. The situation struck Jake as strange, and he questioned whether he was dreaming until he realized the truth of the situation unfolding before him. His return to reality was immediate upon hearing her speak. "Oh, Shelley, I'm currently with him. Thanks for arranging this date. I hope it goes as well as yours did last week. He'll call you tomorrow to plan another date. I'll provide a full report later. Gotta go. Thanks again." The agony in Jake's heart escalated beyond a migraine. Unsure of what to do, he realized they were oblivious to his presence and the reasons behind it. Situated in the living room beside the bedroom, the chair he occupied remained out of sight, offering a concealed front-row view of the unfolding drama. As he sat there, his blood began to boil, doing nothing to alleviate his headache. Nausea intensified from both the migraine and the distressing events. Heartbroken, tears welled up as he acknowledged the end of his marriage with the woman he loved. In complete silence, he listened as the man praised his wife's allure after their pants hit the floor. Jake found himself spiraling into an inescapable emotional abyss. He heard the couple lie down on the bed, and his wife, Linda, complimented the man, Blake, on their friendship and handling something substantial. Exerting self-restraint, he waited for the opportune moment to intervene, which arrived sooner than expected. After granting them a brief moment, he concluded it was time to confront the two lovers. Suppressing pain and anger, he rose and mustered strength to face them in their marital bed, moving slowly and quietly, although noise from the lovers drowned any sound he made. Linda, engrossed in betrayal, noticed Jake standing nearby. Panicking, she attempted to separate from Blake, who persisted despite her protests. The revelation came too late. Jake's head and heartache overwhelmed him. Retrieving a loaded Glock G45 from his nightstand, he aimed at Blake's left temple. Blake collapsed onto Linda, who lay in shock. With tear-filled eyes, Jake addressed Linda, saying, "I loved you with all my heart, and you took away everything I cherished. My heart is broken." He fired the next bullet into her head, witnessing the departure of life from her body. Jake reached out to me, his brother Robbie. Despite having just committed a double homicide, his voice remained strangely calm. I greeted him casually, asking, "Hey bro, how are you?" Urgently, Jake instructed me to listen closely. He disclosed discovering Linda in bed with a guy named Blake, whom he suspected to be the new tennis instructor. Overhearing Linda talking to Shelley, he believed Shelley might be involved with Blake as well. Worried, he advised me to keep an eye on Shelley. Interrupting any attempts to respond, Jake insisted I listen further. He admitted to eliminating Linda and Blake in his bed, emphasizing the gravity of his words. wanting to spare me from his anguish. Jake encouraged me to investigate if Shelley was cheating on me. Overwhelmed by migraines and the profound betrayal, he couldn't endure it any longer. He expressed his love for me, apologized, and bid farewell before the phone went silent. Before putting the next bullet in his head, Jake dialed emergency hotline to report the double homicide self-destruction, ensuring they had the correct address. They found Jake in a chair with a migraine, holding a weapon, his head leaning against a nearby wall. Arriving 20 minutes later, I encountered a bloody scene. I'm Robbie, and Jake was my older brother. This incident occurred a year ago, marking the worst day of my life and causing significant changes in my world. Losing my older brother to his unfaithful wife was challenging for everyone, particularly impactful on me. Jake had been my best friend, and I loved him deeply. The revelation of Linda's affair and the subsequent homicides and self-destructions turned her into a hated figure in our close-knit community. Still grappling with anger and depression over my brother's passing away, I kept Jake's revelations from Shelley, opting to closely monitor my wife. After Jake's self-destruction, I became paranoid and hired a high-end security company to install various monitoring devices and software. It took 2 weeks for everything to be ready. If Shelley was involved in Linda's infidelity, I aimed to uncover the extent of her own betrayal. My pain persisted, and I became obsessed with understanding my wife's role in the case. Copulation between Shelley and me became rare and cold after Jake's self-destruction, and the revelation of Shelley's involvement in Linda's infidelity. Upon confirming Shelley's infidelity, I harbored anger and a desire for revenge against her for betraying me and contributing to Jake's self-destruction. Over the year, the security company provided me with extensive video and audio recordings of Shelley and her lover engaging in loving acts. Although hurtful, the most painful aspects were Shelley's conversations with her lover, replaying certain phrases in my head. Her lover questioned why she stayed with me, highlighting their shared belief that our bed life was dull compared to theirs. He suggested she should leave me and move in with him. However, Shelley explained that I was grieving my brother's passing away and coping with depression, not wanting to add more pressure on me. She reassured her lover that she didn't need copulation with me as long as she had him. Despite their physical connection, Shelley emphasized her love for me and her commitment to our relationship. She clarified that their relationship was purely about closeness, expressing nostalgia for Blake and disbelief at his demise. They discussed the absence of Blake and expressed concern about my mental state, hoping I wasn't as unstable as my brother. Shelley's lover assured her he wouldn't bring her to our house like Blake did, and insisted they were fine, vowing never to get caught. He pledged not to let a similar incident happen to them. After discovering Shelley's infidelity, I devised a plan. She had cheated on me with the assistant tennis coach, Jared Roberts, later promoted to head coach after Blake's untimely passing away. A few weeks later, my anticipated opportunity arrived. Jared was invited to a banquet honoring the country club's top tennis program. I called Shelley, informing her about the banquet, and she was thrilled at the idea of staying at the Ritz-Carlton and spending the entire night with him. Conveniently, I mentioned my 2-week trip, coinciding with the banquet dates. My intention was to ensure Shelley had enough rope to hang herself. As expected, the next day she called Jared, sharing the good news. She persuaded him to take an extended trip, stay 3 nights at a hotel in Orlando, and promised to make his world rock. Naturally, he agreed. Over the next week, they talked about it on the phone and in their messages. It was Shelley's idea to turn the getaway into a fake honeymoon, telling Jared she would like to be his new bride and wife for the 3 days. To further her plan, she even suggested buying a new engagement ring for the occasion and booking a honeymoon hotel room to make it more realistic. They planned to present themselves as newlyweds to attract attention and experience the thrill. She even told Jared that she wished it was real and that he really was her husband. Reading all these texts infuriated me and fueled the embers of my revenge. I was going to enjoy watching her face the demise of everything she loved. Shelley spent all her time working out in the gym, but I was unimpressed and wanted nothing to do with my cheating soon-to-be ex-wife. She was going to spend 3 days with Jared as his wife on a pretend honeymoon. This would be her first extended time alone with another man since she got married 10 years ago. Shelley and Jared thought it would be romantic, So she bought several attractive outfits, bikinis, and lingerie for their date and planned everything out. I was amazed and jealous of the effort she put into this guy. The love I once had for her was gone, and this level of betrayal drained the last drop of love I had left. It was over, and it was time for Shelley to feel the pain. On the way to the hotel, I called Shelley but only received her voicemail. I left her a message saying that I loved her and would see her in 10 days. Shelley called me back an hour later, seemingly wanting to make sure I didn't suspect anything. She told me that she loved me and that the children were at their friend's house. Shelley mentioned she would order pizza when the kids got home, and they would watch movies all night. She expressed how much she missed me, said goodbye, and told me that she loved me more than anything in the world, eagerly awaiting my return. The realization hit me like a wave, and I couldn't believe she would lie to me so easily. Arriving at the hotel, I handed my car to the valet. Inquiring at the reception, I asked if Mr. and Mrs. Roberts had checked in earlier. My anger intensified when the receptionist confirmed that the newlyweds had indeed checked into their honeymoon suite the day before. To gather more information, I contacted the hotel's restaurants and confirmed their reservation for 6 p.m. that evening at the main restaurant. Strategically choosing the best viewing spot, I carefully followed the couple throughout dinner without being noticed. As they left, I positioned myself at the entrance, planning to make it appear as if I were entering the restaurant at the same time they were leaving. Observing the newlyweds holding hands, I timed everything perfectly. I deliberately turned the corner to run into them. At that moment, I collided with Shelley's beau, nearly knocking him over, and everyone turned to look. We both staggered slightly, regained composure with a smile, and I took a step back, apologizing. "Oh, I'm so sorry, excuse me." Then I spotted Shelley with mouth agape, simulating shock and surprise. She, adorned in her alluring dress, wished to flee and hide. Her worst fear had materialized. Caught in complete shock with wide-open eyes, she was exposed. I addressed her. "Shelley, is that you? What are you doing here?" I said with a practiced expression on my face. Jared, her boyfriend, couldn't comprehend who I was or what was unfolding for several minutes. I then stepped back, gazing at my wife as if her outfit astonished me. I couldn't fathom how she appeared. She wore a very short, low-cut dress with no bra, nylon stockings, captivating heels, and glamorous makeup and hair. Thoughts raced through my mind, desiring she could dress similarly for me. It seemed like a special ensemble, and I had never seen her exude such sensuality. I was perplexed, contemplating the circumstances. Shelley acknowledged she was caught and struggled to think of something to say, but she just stood there with her mouth agape. Attempting to compose herself, she mentioned that I should be in Jacksonville, explaining that plans had changed due to her job. Bewildered by the scene, I questioned if she was provocatively dressed with some guy. I suggested going out into the lobby to talk, almost shouting and grabbing her hand. Once in the lobby, I confronted her, revisiting our earlier discussion about staying home with the children. I inquired about her presence at the hotel and the person she was on a date with. I repeated my disbelief, wondering if it wasn't what I thought. Looking at her hand and then into her eyes, I pointed out the absence of her wedding rings and questioned if she had cheated on me. Observing the replaced gold ring on her finger, a stark contrast to the large diamond one given by her lover for their pretend honeymoon weekend, she seemed trapped, yearning to escape. In response, she claimed her love for me, insisting it meant nothing. I pressed on, questioning the absence of her wedding ring and the presence of a new gold ring. Accusing her of leaving me for someone else, I asserted that it seemed like something was indeed happening. Throughout, I heightened the pressure, savoring every moment of her confusion. In that tense moment, I turned to the tennis player, my voice firm as I demanded an explanation. "Why don't you tell me what's going on?" Shelley, caught in the middle, looked at Jared with fear, unsure of how he would respond. Jared, attempting to ease the situation, told me to relax, echoing Shelley's assurance that nothing inappropriate was happening. He explained there was an awards banquet at the hotel, and Shelley had kindly accompanied him to support our country club. According to him, it was just a favor, and everything was fine. Suppressing a laugh, I tried to comprehend the absurdity of the situation. I pressed further, questioning if Shelley was only being nice and attending the ceremony as Jared's date. Then, I inquired about their lodging, making it clear that lying would not be tolerated. I intended to inspect both rooms before leaving. Silence fell as they both looked at the floor, avoiding eye contact. Shelley, breaking the silence, pleaded with me not to be upset, expressing her love and attempting to downplay the situation by mentioning that only a few days would have passed and no one would have known about it. The harsh reality struck as the truth unfolded. She spent a few days with him, sharing the same room, engaging in loving acts, and conspicuously absent were my wedding rings, replaced by a new gold band. Shock set in as I confronted her with disbelief. Despite already knowing the answer, I didn't let up, feigning astonishment. "Darling, it's not what you think," she tried to explain, seeking to justify her actions. My anger, though simulated, surged as I demanded a straightforward response. "Answer the question. I'll go to the front desk to get some answers, so you better start talking. Do you live in the same room? Answer me." Tearfully, she admitted, "Yes." The floodgates opened, and she sobbed, unable to hide the truth any longer. "Are you having closeness? And remember, I'm not an idiot." Again, through tears, Shelley confessed, "Yes." The pivotal question lingered. "Are you pretending to be his wife?" Sobbing, she insisted, "It's not what you think, baby." I pressed harder, demanding a clear response. "Answer the damn question. Did you check into this hotel as Mr. and Mrs. Rogers?" In embarrassment, and with a tearful voice, she reluctantly admitted, "Yes." I grasped the situation and made a decision, stating that I understood. I informed Shelley that I would leave her and her new husband alone. I mentioned that I was returning home, and we would contact a lawyer in the morning. I conveyed that we were done, emphasizing that she had left our love, our marriage, and our life together, all to have fun with that tennis player. Shelley pleaded desperately, expressing her love and stating that she didn't want a divorce. She emphasized that I was her husband, and she couldn't lose me, urging me to understand. I remained firm, stating that I didn't understand. I offered one more chance for her to explain the situation so that I could understand. I asked her to tell me why I should put up with my wife sleeping with another man and pretending to be his wife. She begged once again, asking me to understand that it was only supposed to last a few days and that she needed it. She insisted that it was just about closeness and that she didn't love him, emphasizing that she only loved me. I questioned whether I should be okay with her sleeping with another man for a few days to have some fun. Shelley, now hysterical, sobbed between her hands, realizing the gravity of her actions and lacking a good excuse. All she could do was beg for understanding, apologizing, and expressing her love. She acknowledged that it sounded bad, but believed we could get through it. She pleaded for forgiveness, expressing her desire to be with me. Silence ensued. The tennis guy grew irritated and impatient, interjecting to tell me to step back a little and pointing out how upset Shelley was. I turned to Jared with a deaf stare, instructing him to shut up and get out of my sight. I told him to leave me and my real wife alone, emphasizing that he had already ruined our marriage, and that should be enough for the day. Unfazed, Jared stood up, placed his hand on Shelley's shoulder, and stated that he would be in their room, asking her to come up when I was done. She pushed his hand away furiously, not wanting anything to do with him. In that moment, I couldn't help but laugh. I comprehended the situation and made a decision. Suddenly, she no longer desired to be with her lover, and he reveled in everything unfolding. I continued to taunt Shelley as she sat there sobbing, urging her not to be rude to her new husband. I suggested that I might be ruining their honeymoon, emphasizing that we both knew she wanted this and no longer wanted to be with me. I insinuated that she didn't love me, claiming that if she did, she wouldn't cheat on me and show me such disrespect. After Jared departed, we were left alone. She pleaded with me to stay, gazing at me with imploring eyes for a few minutes. I questioned her about the duration of her involvement with Jared. Once again, she lied, insisting it was their first encounter. I marveled at how effortlessly she could deceive me. I probed further, asking if she had ever spoken ill of me or scolded me to Jared during our time together or loving moments. Once again, she lied, denying any such behavior. She reassured me, expressing her love and emphasizing my significance to her. She urged us to leave, proposing an immediate return home to be together. Amidst a whirlwind of emotions, I took out my phone and muted the audio. With a heavy heart, I initiated a playlist featuring snippets of our conversations from the past 6 months. Firstly, I'm aware of your 2-year-long infidelity. Secondly, could you explain this to me? The sound was crisp and loud. The first audio assured someone not to worry about me, claiming ignorance. The second audio expressed dissatisfaction, voicing dislike for our loving moments due to my perceived dullness. The third audio professed commitment, choosing to stay not for the physical aspect, but out of love. Subsequently, the fourth audio acknowledged me as a good provider and father, with no intention of letting me go. The fifth audio made a damning comparison, hinting at someone else being better in bed. The sixth audio conveyed affection and love for another person's ability to arouse her. The seventh audio declared allegiance, stating that her entirety belonged to someone else, not me. Over 50 audio files followed, each one mocking and humiliating me and our marriage. I couldn't fathom the depth of her contempt for me, and her words transcended playful banter. They were profoundly hurtful and disrespectful. Unfortunately, these words would continue to haunt me indefinitely. She wore an expression of apathy, shock, sadness, and utter devastation, a marked departure from her usual demeanor. There was a certain satisfaction in witnessing her grasp the reality that she had irreversibly shattered the marriage, and things would never be the same for her. In a resolute tone, I communicated to Shelley that our relationship was terminated due to my inability to endure her lies any longer. I disclosed my awareness of her infidelity and extramarital affairs spanning at least 2 years. Adding a layer of intrigue, I informed her that Jake had contacted me the night he shot his wife and her ex-lover, overhearing her conversation with Linda about her fondness for Blake's friend. I had been cognizant of her deceit, lies, and disrespect towards me. My intention had been to see how far she would go, and she hadn't slowed down. I highlighted how her actions and remarks unmistakably portrayed me merely as a good provider and father to our children. Disclosing the existence of audio recordings of all her calls and messages, I underscored that I knew her true sentiments about me, our bed life, and her discontent. The ultimatum was straightforward. She must cease the deception and lies, or the truth would be exposed to everyone. After a significant pause, I conveyed that I would be reasonable, but she needed to sign the divorce papers without contesting the agreement. I cautioned that if she chose to resist, I wouldn't hesitate to reveal all the videos and audios to everyone, including her parents. I pointed out that our children were old enough to decide who they wanted to live with, and after we explained her infidelity, lies, and deceit, I was confident they would choose to live with me. I expressed to Shelley that the truly heartbreaking aspect of all this was that I once loved her with all my heart and envisioned a lifetime together. I shared that when Jake first told me about her, I refused to believe it, but the terrible truth unfolded, and my heart shattered. I made it clear that she would have to live with the weight of guilt and the loss of love forever, stating firmly, "We are never, ever getting back together." Leaving Shelley in tears, I rose, drove home, and grappled with my brother's passing away. I contemplated that revenge didn't bring peace to my wife. 5 years later, I encountered a woman in a cafe, and we developed a close friendship. I refrained from remarrying, explaining that I could never trust another woman the way I did before. We dated for several years and remained friends. Shelley suffered a nervous breakdown and was hospitalized for a year. After the divorce was finalized, she was never invited back to the city, where they learned of her involvement in the loss of lives of Jake and Linda and her betrayal of the family. She lost custody of her children and only saw them every other weekend. She spent several years deeply depressed because of what she had done. As long as she continued to take her medication, she was able to live off the divorce agreement and her job as a secretary in a real estate office in another city. The children grew up without any problems because I kept them safe and protected. The people around us rallied around me and the children, which allowed us to lead a normal life. Shelley never recovered from the loss of her love, her children, and the wonderful life she once had. Every night she went to bed thinking about how many lives she had ruined, and how her life had been ruined by selfishness and narcissism. Shelley became an active church attender, and eventually dedicated her life to the church in hopes of finding forgiveness. Oh yeah, Mr. Tennis Pro was attacked one night after leaving another married mistress. His 2 Achilles tendons were cut after being tasered. At this point, his tennis career ended. When the police asked him what happened and what he remembered, he remained silent, and did not say anything. However, he remembered the voice and received the message loud and clear. He couldn't identify the voice, but decided not to share the message with police. He will never forget what he was told. Stop seducing married women.
Story 4. I remember when life seemed to be carved from moments of shared happiness and simple joys. Kelly and I built our world together, piece by piece, turning our house into a home filled with laughter and warmth. Our days brimmed with little victories, cooking new recipes, spending lazy Sunday mornings with our daughter Grace, and finding comfort in the routines we built. It was a life I thought was steady, reliable, and real. Yet, life is often a stranger to permanence. The cracks in our foundation began as whispers I chose to ignore. Kelly's lingering silences, the occasional distance in her eyes, things I brushed aside, convinced that time and love would mend whatever rifts had appeared. But the subtle signs turned into resounding echoes, and before I knew it, the life we had crafted so carefully unraveled before me. The room blurred as I sat on the floor, overwhelmed by exhaustion and emptiness. Not long ago, I never imagined I'd be here. Now, I could feel the carpet fibers against my palms. Kelly and I had spent so much making this room perfect. I closed my eyes, trying to clear my foggy mind. How did I end up here? Is this who I am? When I opened my eyes, I saw the large wooden bed, and memories of Kelly hit me hard. I recoiled, realizing things like this were in the past. Everything had spiraled out of control. My hands dropped, and I saw a whiskey bottle and an empty pill container. The room smelled strongly of alcohol. A bitter smile appeared, but I quickly felt panic as I thought about the letters on the nightstand. They could easily fall into the wrong hands. Nausea crept up, but I fought it off. Why did it have to end like this? I murmured. I imagined people I missed, but I knew they probably didn't feel the same. My daughter would likely hate me for what I'd become, though it seemed she already did. I couldn't bear the pain anymore. My mind was a mess. In those final moments, I saw my mistakes, but couldn't change anything. The darkness took over. Just a week ago, I was full of joy, spinning my daughter Grace around our home in Perth. She was 19, and the night before, her boyfriend John had proposed. I knew it was coming. He'd asked for my blessing, and I gave it without hesitation. Grace and John had been together since middle school. For years, Grace told us all about John's romantic gestures, including the scavenger hunt that led to his proposal in Kings Park. I twirled Grace as if she were still a child. The next morning, they shared the news in the kitchen, and my heart swelled with happiness for them. Despite their youth, I believed in their love. I truly thought they had what it took to make it. I held Grace's hand again, smiling at the engagement ring. "That's wonderful, Gracie," I said, looking at John. "You made a great choice." Kelly laughed from across the counter. At 42, she was still stunning. Brown hair, bright eyes, sun-kissed skin. We all looked at her as she responded. "You should thank me too," Kelly said, raising her wine glass. "I helped John pick her." I was surprised, and I saw John's face turn red. "Mom, that's inappropriate," Grace said. "It's okay, baby. I love it, and I know you made the final choice." The comment hung in the air, leaving me a bit embarrassed. In all our years together, I had never seen Kelly act so disrespectfully. But she had been acting strangely lately, in ways I couldn't quite pinpoint. Little things, comments, and actions that weren't like the woman I knew. Dinner was full of celebration, and after dessert, Grace and John left for their small apartment. Kelly and I snuggled in bed, but the incident with her comment lingered in my mind. Sunday morning, Kelly shocked me again, refusing any physical affection. I was stunned and took about half an hour to process it. I showered and shaved, and when I came out, Kelly was gone. She had left a note saying she was leaving. I suddenly felt angry. In all the years I'd known Kelly, she'd never treated me this way. Disrespectful. I had no idea what was happening to her. I made myself coffee and couldn't stop wondering, is she cheating on me? As I finished my coffee, I got a call from Roger, a close friend. "Hey, Bart, how's it going?" he asked cheerfully. I greeted him but stayed quiet. "Bart, something's wrong, isn't it?" he said, sensing it. I spent the next few minutes explaining. Roger laughed. "If she's cheating, there's not much you can do. Divorce is 50-50 and she doesn't work, so she'll take you for everything," he said bluntly. "That doesn't help," I shot back, irritated. "I wasn't trying to console you, just being real," he replied, still serious. "Why don't we talk about it tomorrow at work? We need to go over the Pembroke project report," he suggested. I agreed, though without much enthusiasm. Roger and I worked together. He was the program manager, I was the senior engineer. We made a good team. Sunday dragged on. Kelly came home late, slipping into bed without a word. Though she knew I was awake, the next morning she tried to be sweet. That won't happen, Kelly, I said as I got out of bed. Are you saying no to closeness? She asked, incredulous. I looked at her and began dressing. I won't touch you after you disrespected me last weekend. If you're cheating on me... I stopped, not knowing how to finish. Kelly stepped up to me, her face close. You'll do it, Bartholomew. You can't refuse. Her grin softened but didn't disappear. Go back to bed. We both need to relax, she said, trying to coax me. I shook my head. Who the hell are you? You don't understand the contempt I feel. Well then, screw you, she snapped and went back to bed. I left the room, disgusted for the first time in 21 years of marriage. At work, I couldn't focus. My assistant Mira noticed. Bart, are you okay? You don't seem like yourself, she asked, concerned. Mira had worked with me for 10 years. She had a tough past, escaping an abusive relationship with her ex and a young daughter. Despite her beauty, Mira was sharp and tough. People who underestimated her learned the hard way. I debated telling her about Kelly, then decided to. As I spoke, Mira's expression shifted from concern to anger. I don't know what to do, Mira. If she's cheating, I never thought this would happen, I confessed, feeling defeated. Mira's hand rested on my shoulder, an unusual gesture. I looked into her sympathetic eyes. Well, first you need to focus on the Pembroke meeting, she said. There's a concern about the pipes and concrete in the structure. I snapped back to work. Why is this just now being mentioned? Roger didn't tell me anything, I asked, my mind turning to the technical details. Mira looked uneasy. I don't know why it wasn't brought up earlier, but I just saw the agenda and it's worrying. A moment later, Roger popped into my office. You ready, buddy? He asked with a smile. Roger, what's going on with the pipes and concrete at the Pembroke project? I asked, trying to prepare for the meeting. He waved it off. Don't worry about it. We'll figure it out. I like to know these things before meeting the client, I replied. It'll be fine, Bart. We'll figure it out, he said dismissively. The meeting was a trap. When we entered, the Pembroke owners were already there. They were usually friendly, but as I spoke, their expressions turned darker. Peter, the CEO, asked, What about the extra concrete and pipes in the northeast? I looked at Roger, but he didn't say anything. I'll check on it. I hadn't heard about cost overruns, but reports from last week said everything was on track. Peter's frown deepened. Then why did I sign off on over $200,000 in additional costs for concrete and pipes? I looked at Roger again, unsure how to respond. He stood up, holding a folder. Gentlemen, if you could give us a moment, we'll figure this out, he said. Bart, let's step out for a minute. We went into another room where our boss, Clarence, was waiting. What did they say? Clarence asked. Roger quickly spoke up, handing Clarence the folder. They asked about the missing materials. Clarence looked at me, and for the first time, I saw anger in his eyes. What do you have to say, Bartholomew? He spat. I was shocked. I don't know what to say. The reports I got said everything was on track. I didn't approve those expenses, I replied, feeling the situation slip out of control. Clarence opened the folder. So this is your version? He said firmly. Sir? I asked, confused. I glanced at Roger, who was serious. Bartholomew, I have documents here for $206,000, and the payments were made to an account in your name. After all these years, is this how you repay me? Clarence shouted. The meeting turned into a verbal attack. Neither he nor Roger wanted to hear my side. They brought in HR and I was fired for fraud. Clarence said he was involving the police and Myra was let go too because of her proximity to me. As I was escorted out with my things, I saw Roger grinning. When I wasn't looking, I caught Mira outside, crying by her car with security watching us. Mira, are you okay? I asked. She turned sharply. You bastard, Bartholomew. How could you? $200,000 in fraud. I trusted you and you took my job, she shouted. Mira, it wasn't me, I pleaded. Really? She pointed to the signed documents. I saw your signature, Bart. How could you? She glared at me with hatred. And the story about Kelly? Was that a lie too? You think I didn't notice the way you look at me? She was furious. I hate you, she spat. You ruined my career and I can't get another job because of you. You lie, cheat, and steal, and now you ask me how I feel. Screw you, Bart. In all our years together, I had never heard Mira curse. Her words stunned me. Before I could respond, she slapped me hard. You ruined my career. I can't get a reference, and now I'm tainted by your fraud. I hope it was worth it. I stood there, shocked, my cheek burning from the slap. Mira stared at me one last time before getting in her car and driving off without another word. I didn't know what to do, so I drove home and parked in the driveway. Kelly was waiting for me. So the deceived husband comes home. Pathetic, she sneered. As I walked inside, I couldn't help but notice something strange. Kelly seemed happy, not upset or worried. "What's going on, Kelly? I didn't do this. I don't know what's happening," I said, feeling lost and confused. She grinned. "Who cares, Bart? I'm leaving you." I'd never seen such contempt in her eyes. "It's over. I've been seeing someone for 6 months. He's exciting, has money, and goes places you never will," she said. "As for you, you have no job, no friends, and you're probably going to prison for fraud soon." Her words stung, but she wasn't finished. "Do you admit you're a loser? A cheating woman of easy virtue?" I asked, anger creeping into my voice. Kelly laughed. "Yes, it was all about me, and I deserve it. Haven't you noticed? It's always been about me." For a brief moment, I thought I saw sadness in her eyes, memories of the good times we had. But it passed quickly, replaced by coldness. "I'm done, Bart. I'm moving on." Kelly leaned in. "Make it easier on yourself. Give me the house and most of the property. You'll be in prison soon. Sign the papers and pack your stuff. You have a week before I file a restraining order." "So you're staying with your new guy?" I asked, feeling the full weight of the betrayal. "Of course. His place is smaller, but we'll move in here once you're gone." "Don't follow me, Bart, or I'll call the cops," she said, her voice icy. I sat down, defeated. Kelly noticed the red handprint on my cheek from Mira's slap earlier and smiled. "Well, at least she was fired too. Maybe you should go die somewhere, Bartholomew." Then she left. I did nothing all day, not even drinking. The next day, I still didn't know what to do. I tried calling Grace, but she sent it to voicemail. After several rings, she picked up. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice cold. "Grace, I started to explain. "Leave it, Dad," she cut me off. "Mom told me everything. Your cheating, the affair with your assistant, and the $200,000 you stole. You've ruined so many lives. I've never been more disappointed." I was speechless. Before I could defend myself, she continued, "John and I don't want anything to do with you. You're on the news as someone the police are investigating. Stay away from us. I don't want you at my wedding unless you're in jail. If you're not, I'll find someone else to walk me down the aisle." I didn't answer, my tears falling uncontrollably. "Dad, do you even realize how much you've ruined everything?" she asked sharply. "Goodbye, Dad. From now on, you're dead to me. Don't contact me again." And she hung up. I collapsed on the floor, sobbing. 2 days later, the police came to arrest me. They didn't ask if I did it, just where the money was, who my partners were, and how long I'd been defrauding the company. After questioning, they let me go, but told me not to leave the city, as I had to appear in court next week. I walked into the house, staring at the pictures of Kelly, Grace, and me, the art we'd bought, and the trophies Grace had earned over the years. Everything once full of meaning now felt empty. The past week was a blur. Deep down, I knew something was missing, some connection I wasn't making, but all I knew was that I was innocent. My wife left me, my daughter disowned me, I was fired, my assistant blamed me, and even my friends cut ties. The few who contacted me expressed their disappointment and asked. I never reach out again. Defeated, I entered the bedroom with no idea what to do next. As an engineer, I always solved problems, but now, I didn't even know what problem I was facing. After a shower, I ate a sandwich with stale bread and jam, which only made me feel worse. I thought I could get through this if Grace hadn't pushed me out of her life. I looked at the table. There was a packet of sleeping pills and an unopened bottle of whiskey. For the first time, a dark thought crossed my mind. What if I took them both? I shook my head. No, that wasn't the answer. I just needed some time. The next morning I was served again, this time with a restraining order. I wasn't to go within 100 meters of Kelly, Grace, John, or Roger. I had to leave the house by Monday. What struck me, though, was that the order mentioned Roger, too. Why Roger? I muttered. Something clicked in my mind. Damn it, I shouted. In a fit of rage, I sent Roger a text. You bastard, this is all your fault. I'm going to find you and destroy you. No response. Half an hour later, the same detectives arrested me for violating the restraining order by contacting Roger. They didn't want to hear my side. They just wanted to lock me up. They told me a detective car would be parked outside, watching me for the next 24 hours. Back at the house, I was tempted to drink. 3 shots of whiskey later, I took out 3 sheets of paper and started writing letters. To Kelly, I wrote about my anger and disappointment, cursing her betrayal and wishing her a fiery end. To Grace, I poured out my hurt, telling her I never did what I was accused of and that she needed to see the truth. I also asked her not to let Roger walk her down the aisle. My tears stained the paper as I sealed it. To Mira, I apologized, explaining that she wasn't at fault, and told her I suspected Roger was the one who betrayed us both. I expressed regret for any discomfort I may have caused her, and ended by asking if she could ever forgive me. I sealed each letter in envelopes, then grabbed the whiskey and pills. I placed the letters on the bedside table, then added a note to the detectives. Look into Roger's finances if you want the truth. Next time, do your job and stop forcing an innocent man to do this. I walked into the bathroom, taking a long, hot shower. After a few sips of whiskey, I washed down the sleeping pills. Standing in front of the mirror, I wondered why I was doing this. I'd never been like this, but I felt like I had no way out. If the world doesn't want me, I'll leave it, I thought. Later, I was told Detective David Roundlight saved my life. He was keeping watch across the street when our neighbor, Mrs. Hawkins, came over to check on us. When they didn't get an answer at the door, the detective pushed it open and found me on the bedroom floor. An ambulance was called, and the house was turned into a crime scene. This was the first break I had all week. I was barely conscious when they found me. Detective Roundlight and criminologists discovered hidden cameras recording to a hard drive in a linen closet, something I knew nothing about. I was unconscious for 3 days. When I woke up, I was surprised to find myself alive. "Where am I?" I croaked, looking at the nurse. "You're at Hollywood Private Hospital," she replied quietly. She gestured to a chair. "Your friend didn't sleep all night." "Friend?" I asked weakly. "I have no friends. They all left." "Well, this one didn't," she said, turning my head to reveal Mira, sleeping in a chair nearby. "Mira," I said softly, feeling a strange sense of relief. Mira woke up when I spoke and rushed to my side. She took my hand in hers, tears welling in her eyes. "What the hell were you thinking, Bart?" she demanded, her voice shaking with emotion. I turned away, feeling ashamed. "I thought it was the only way out." She shook her head. "You've never given up like this before. What were you thinking?" We were silent for a while. The only sound was the beeping of the machines as she waited for my answer. "I'm sorry, Mira. I'm sorry for everyone. Kelly, you, Grace, I couldn't handle it. No one asked me if I did any of this. I felt cornered. My wife told me to die. My daughter disowned me, and my friend betrayed me. I hurt you and disappointed you." Mira nodded, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed. "I'm sorry too, Bart," she whispered. "I was angry and didn't stop to think that you were innocent." I closed my eyes. "It's okay, Mira." "No, it's not okay," she said, her voice breaking. "You're here because of me too. I don't know if I can forgive myself." I squeezed her hand. "It's okay, Mira, it's okay." We sat in silence until the doctor entered. He smiled as he checked my chart. "Well, Mr. O'Hare, good to see you awake. How are you feeling?" "Alive," I replied. "I didn't expect this." The doctor frowned, and Mira did too. He finished his exam and mentioned that a detective had been asking about me, then left us alone again. I couldn't meet Mira's gaze. "I'm guessing you're here because of my letter?" She shook her head. "I haven't seen it. Detective Roundlight told me about it." She wiped away tears. "My cousin works here, and when he saw your name on the list, he called me. He said they brought you in." I still couldn't look at her. Mira continued, her voice soft. "I was angry, but deep down I knew you didn't do this. After all these years, if you had been capable of something like this, I would have known. But I had to stop and think. If you had done this, I would have seen it. You were set up." Mira paused, then said, "When my cousin Maurice called and told me you were here, I knew. I knew you didn't do those terrible things. I'm so sorry, Bart. Truly sorry." She sobbed, resting her head on my chest. Her tears soaked through my hospital gown. After a few minutes, she pulled back, wiping her face. As she tried to let go of my hand, I held onto it, and she gently wiped my tears away, offering a shy smile. Taking a deep breath, Mira continued. "At first, I couldn't understand how you could do something like that. You loved your job. But when Roger showed me the signed documents, I was so angry. I tensed at Roger's name, and she noticed. It was him, wasn't it? Roger set you up, didn't he?" I nodded. "I think so. I can't prove it, but it looks that way. He never told us about the cost overruns, and he signed documents I never saw. I also think he's having an affair with Kelly." I paused, closing my eyes. Mira's hand was still holding mine. "I'm sorry too, Mira. I never thought Roger or Kelly would hurt you, but all the evidence is against me. I couldn't prove my innocence, so I thought this was the only way out." Before Mira could respond, a voice interrupted. "Well, I know you couldn't," the man said as he entered the room. He was big, fit, and seemed confident. "They did a good job setting you up, but criminals who get away with hundreds of thousands don't act like you. Mr. Different, I'm Detective David Roundlight. I found you with Mrs. Hawkins. Glad to see you're awake," he said with a small smile. I shrugged. "Sorry, Detective, but I'm sure you'll arrest me when I get out of here." Mira squeezed my hand. Roundlight looked at us both. "I've been assigned to your case. I understand it, and there are several things that don't add up. Would you like to be interrogated again? I guess so. What do I have to lose? I replied. Mira interrupted. Shouldn't he have a lawyer first? Roundlight sighed. Yes, he should hire a lawyer. We'll wait until he does. Mira nodded. I'll take care of it, she said, letting go of my hand for the first time since I woke up. As she left to make the call, Roundlight and I both watched her. Even though she was upset with me, she was still striking, and we both noticed. She likes you, the detective said. She's been my assistant for 10 years. We both had a tough week, so she's protective right now, I replied, with a small laugh. I think it's more than that. Unofficially, I read your letters. She's angry, but she cares about you a lot. And right now, you need people on your side. I raised an eyebrow. Detective, are you sure you want to hear this? He grinned. You're the one being examined, Mr. O'Hare, but I think there's more to your case than the other officers realized. You believe you're innocent, right? Of course I'm innocent. I would never steal from a place I loved working at, I said firmly. The detective nodded just as Mira returned. My second cousin, Reagan Brown, will represent Bart, Mira said as if nothing had happened. Roundlight smiled and handed Mira his card. I know Miss Brown. She's a good lawyer. Have her contact me as soon as she can. After some more conversation, Roundlight left. That was unusual, I said once he was gone. Yeah, the police aren't usually so friendly, Mira agreed. We sat in silence for a moment before I asked, Who's looking after Tilly? She's with my mother, Mira said, pulling out a drawing from her purse. Tilly made this for you. She handed me a folded piece of paper with a drawing of a hospital and an ambulance, showing me in bed with Get Well Soon written in Tilly's handwriting. I wiped away a few tears. Thank you, I said quietly. Have you heard from Grace? I asked. Mira shook her head. I've tried calling, left messages, but nothing, she replied sadly. We talked for about 45 minutes before Mira's second cousin, Reagan, arrived. After introductions, Mira excused herself, leaving me alone with Reagan. Like Mira, Reagan was beautiful, with sandy brown hair. She was obviously related to Mira, though their features were different. She likes you, Reagan said, echoing Detective Roundlight's earlier comment. I chuckled. She's worked for me for years, Reagan smirked. Men, what do you understand? I laughed. I think I have a future ex-wife who's proven I don't have a clue. Reagan's expression softened. Don't worry, I've spoken to Detective Roundlight. Surprisingly, he's on your side. I have some theories, so leave it to me. Your only crime is trusting someone you shouldn't have. She glanced at my bandages. I've heard a lot about you from Mira. She respects you deeply, and she's more devastated by how she treated you than by losing her job. She cares about you. I started to ask a question, but Reagan raised her hand. Don't worry, Bart. I'll represent you for unfair dismissal at your old job. I suspect a lot will fall into place. But for now, I need that divorce petition your ex-wife gave you. What do you want? I darkened. I want as much as I can get, I said quietly. Reagan noticed the anger in my voice. Kelly and Roger mocked you and likely framed you to cover up stealing the company's money. You have the power to destroy them, she said with a wink. Take no prisoners. I liked my new lawyer. Reagan spent more time asking about the events leading to my breakdown, then said she'd contact me in a few days for a formal police interview if nothing else came up. The next few days passed uneventfully. I stayed mostly motionless in bed while doctors and nurses checked on me. Without a phone, I couldn't call anyone, though I doubted anyone would want to talk. The next day, Mira came in with an old paperback, Endymion by Dan Simmons. I laughed when I saw it. I'd read it years ago and loved it. Mira sat next to me, pulling out Pride and Prejudice. What are you doing here? I asked. Foolish man. I'm here to look after you, she said, smiling and shaking her head. We chatted, sharing stories of the past week. She stepped out at lunchtime to bring me a roast beef sandwich with gravy and fried potatoes. Despite everything, I started to feel like myself again. Later that afternoon, just after the doctors removed my IV and told me I'd be discharged the next day if my tests came back clean, I looked at Mira. I don't know where to go, I admitted. I don't even have a phone or wallet. I can't go home. Mira smiled. Reagan got a court order to retrieve some of your things. I managed to get your phone, wallet, clothes, laptop, iPad, and shaving supplies. Mira, I said, stunned. Thank you. Now you can at least find a hotel, she said softly. I looked at her, noticing the worry on her face. What is it? You were right about Roger and Kelly, she said. When we went to get your things, they were there, living together. They didn't expect us. I'm sorry, Bart, I sighed. It's okay, Mira. Well, no, it's not, but thank you for being honest. What happened when they saw you? She smiled mischievously. They started screaming at me to leave until the officer threatened to arrest them for violating the court order. After that, I was allowed to take your things. Mira's voice shook. I was scared for you, Bart. I didn't want to see you hurt again. Promise me you won't do anything like that again, she said, wiping her eyes. I raised my hands. I promise, I said. The next morning, after getting ready to leave the hospital, Mira was there to pick me up. We walked to her car, and as we drove, I realized we were headed to a series of condos near Kings Park. Mira, what are we doing here? I can't stay with you, I said. Of course you can, she replied with a smile. You don't need to pay for a hotel. You can stay in the guest room for a few days. Plus, Reagan will meet us here this afternoon with updates on your case. Mira's home was a cozy 2-story house, modest but comfortable. It was just her and her daughter, Tilly, and they fit perfectly in the space. Over the years, I knew Mira had a small mortgage left, and despite her appearance, she wasn't into partying. Most of her money went toward taking care of Tilly. Once inside, we unpacked my things, and an hour later, Reagan arrived. After a few brief introductions, she sat down and pulled out some folders. You're a very lucky man, Bartholomew, she said seriously. I swallowed hard. Your wife and best friend almost got away with everything. Your bank accounts are frozen, including the one that received the stolen money. That account was opened in your name fraudulently. Mira and I exchanged glances as Reagan continued. It looks like Roger learned to forge your signature. A couple of months ago, he and your wife opened an account at a bank in your name. I have video proof. I've also petitioned to suspend their passports and sued them for fraud and mental cruelty. They're in serious trouble. Reagan paused. I have also started legal action against your former company for unfair dismissal. I spoke to Detective Roundlight, and he'll conduct your formal interrogation tomorrow. Just follow my lead, and everything should be fine. Your wife and Roger will be arrested soon. Over the next hour, we signed papers and discussed the details. Reagan assured me all charges against me would be dropped the next day. After she left, I unpacked some clothes and took my toiletries to the bathroom. Mira and I spent the day talking about what might happen next. When Mira went to pick up Tilly from school, I checked my phone for the first time in days. I had several missed calls and texts, mostly from Kelly, calling me pathetic and telling me to sign the divorce papers before I went to jail. There were also missed calls from my former company asking me to return their calls. But no word from Grace. When Mira and Tilly returned, I forgot about my worries. Tilly was excited to tell me about her day at school and how she'd told her friends I'd be staying with them until I was better. Her energy was contagious, and I loved it. While Mira made dinner, Tilly and I worked on her homework and read together. She was a great reader, and I enjoyed every moment with her. After dinner, we all watched some TV, and Tilly insisted I tuck her in. She asked for a hug and said, "I'm so happy you feel better." It nearly broke me, and I had to wipe away my tears before switching places with Mira to say goodnight to Tilly. It had been a long time since I felt that kind of unconditional love. Tilly's care reminded me of how much I had lost with Grace. Afterward, Mira and I sat on the couch holding hands, talking. Later, when we went to bed, she hugged me tightly and reassured me everything would be okay. The next day, we went through the interrogation. Detective Roundlight and Reagan confirmed that all charges against me were dropped immediately after the questioning. The next evening, the news reported that Kelly and Roger were wanted for multiple charges, including fraud and identity theft. They hadn't been found yet. Later, Grace tried calling for the first time, but I sent her to voicemail. I wasn't ready to talk to her. The next day was mixed. Grace called several times and left messages, but I still wasn't interested in speaking to her. She only reached out after I was cleared, and that angered me. She'd abandoned me without a second thought and ignored Mira while I was in the hospital. Now, she wanted to talk about her mother and Roger's guilt, and I couldn't help but think she owed me an apology. That night, I had a nightmare. I woke up screaming, drenched in sweat. Mira rushed to my side, and even Tilly stood in the doorway, tears in her eyes. I broke down, apologizing over and over. Mira climbed onto the bed, and Tilly snuggled beside me, holding my hand. Mira wrapped her arms around me, offering comfort. "It's okay, Uncle Bart," Tilly said softly. "You just had a bad dream. Mom and I are here. Go to sleep." I tried to rest, but couldn't. Tilly fell asleep with her hand on my stomach, but I felt Mira's gaze on me. "Are you okay, Bart?" she asked gently, holding me close. For a moment, I hesitated. "I don't think so," I replied. "It's just that night. I couldn't finish the sentence. Mira seemed to understand, and she kissed my cheek. "What are we going to do, Bart? This isn't fair. You don't deserve this." I held her close, trying not to wake Tilly. "We'll figure it out. Everything will be fine," I reassured her. That moment brought me back to myself. Mira's concern helped me feel grounded again. I held both Mira and Tilly until morning, when we woke up to a new day. After breakfast, Mira took Tilly to school. I used the time to start looking for a therapist. By the time Mira returned, I'd made a few calls. I explained to her that I was seeking psychological help. Mira smiled, then grew more serious. "Bart, can we talk for a minute?" she asked, leading me to the sofa. I nodded, thinking I knew what she wanted to discuss. "It's okay, Mira," I said. "Last night was hard with Tilly here. If I wake up screaming again, I'll find somewhere else." Her eyes widened, and she placed her hands on mine, panic in her expression. "No, that's not it at all," she said, taking a deep breath. "Actually, it's the opposite. Mira, I don't know how to say this, but I just need—" I trailed off, unsure of my words. Suddenly, Mira blurted, "I'm in love with you." I froze, shocked. "Sorry, I said that wrong. I've been in love with you for a long time," she said, her face turning slightly red. I sat back, still processing her words. Mira looked at me with a mixture of hesitation and hope. "When I heard you were in the hospital, I was terrified I wouldn't get there in time," she continued. "I wanted to tell you before, but I couldn't. Then, after everything, you came here to stay with me and Tilly. I thought you'd understand without me saying anything." "Why now, Mira?" I asked, still trying to understand. She laughed softly, though tinged with sadness. "Because seeing you hurt last night broke my heart. I just want to be there for you, to help you sleep in my arms and lighten your burden. I can't keep holding back." Her eyes met mine. "It was always you, Bart. Haven't you noticed I don't go on dates?" I nodded, confused. "Yes, but I always thought it was because of Tilly." "That's part of it," Mira said hesitantly. "But I never found anyone who could compare to you." I tilted my head, still processing. Mira smiled at me. "From the moment we started working together, you always treated me like everyone else. Explaining things, being kind, helping others learn from their mistakes. You were always good to Tilly, too, helping with her homework and making her feel special. She never knew her father, but she sees you as a father figure. Look how she climbed into bed with you last night because she knew you were hurting." "But, Mira," I started, but she raised her hand to stop me. "When everything fell apart last week, you didn't lash out. Even when I slapped you, you didn't treat me badly." Mira blushed. "You're an amazing person, Bartholomew. I love you for so many reasons. If Kelly's foolish enough to leave you, I'll give you all the love you deserve. In a month, you won't even remember her name." She kissed me, and I kissed her back, holding her close. Time seemed to stand still. "Will you take me, Bart? Will you make me your woman?" Mira's voice became soft and seductive. I was stunned. I had fantasized about her, but everything was moving so fast. I knew Kelly and I were done, but Mira's confession made me feel less of a failure. Yet I wondered if it was just a way to console me. Mira seemed to understand my hesitation, but said nothing. She led me to her bedroom, and we made love. Afterward, we slept peacefully. That night, I had another nightmare. I woke up shaking, but not screaming. Mira held me, and I told her about the dream as we dressed. Her worried expression stayed with me as we went to pick up Tilly from school. Over the next couple of weeks, Roger and Kelly were arrested and charged with fraud and identity theft. They tried to flee to Adelaide, but were caught by Australian customs and detained. The police eventually moved them to Perth. During that time, my relationship with Mira deepened. After that first night, I moved into her bedroom, and we grew closer. I felt like I was 20 again, and it was clear I had fallen in love with her. By the time Roger and Kelly were brought back to Perth, I barely remembered Kelly. Mira was right. I didn't want to hold on to those memories anymore. A month later, Mira, Reagan, and I were in court as witnesses against Roger and Kelly. Roger avoided looking at me, even when I was on the stand. He was sentenced to 15 years, while Kelly, who had been an accomplice, got 20 years, plus an additional 5 for mental misuse against me. The judge also granted our divorce. Reagan immediately contested the division of our savings, arguing that Kelly had prepared unfair divorce papers. She suggested selling the house and splitting the proceeds, as I had no intention of staying in it. Reagan also proposed I serve as trustee for Kelly's funds until she finished her sentence, which took some convincing on Reagan's part. This showed I was willing to compromise, helping to avoid unnecessary legal battles. Roger and Kelly were sent to prison immediately. After the ruling, Kelly's lawyer requested an hour with me before she was taken away. I hesitated, but eventually agreed. Kelly, still in her court clothes, was brought into the interview room after the court adjourned. The room was plain but secure, with chains on the chairs. When she sat down, she looked defeated, avoiding my gaze. For a few minutes, neither of us spoke. It was the first time we'd been alone together since her betrayal. "Sorry, Bart," Kelly said quietly, looking down at her hands. I was surprised that she spoke first, and even more so that her first words were an apology. "Are you sure, Kelly?" I asked, my voice tinged with bitterness. She met my gaze, tears welling but not falling. "Yes, Bart, I'm very sorry," she said. I wanted to reject her apology, but she raised her hand to pause me, so I held my tongue and waited. "Please let me explain, and then you can scold me," she said, sadness in her voice. I leaned back in my chair and gestured for her to continue. "Thank you," she said, looking me in the eyes for the first time. "Believe it or not, I'm sorry. I don't know what happened to me. I've loved you for so long and I still do, even after everything. But what's worse is knowing how much you loved me. You were the perfect husband and lover. But one day I woke up feeling lost." She looked away, staring at her hands. "I began to worry because you still loved me. Even though I felt guilty, Roger was working with you. When he noticed something was wrong with me, it didn't take long before we started our affair. He knew exactly what to say, and slowly, he got me into bed. After that, he used my guilt to execute his plan." Kelly paused, wringing her hands. "Roger always felt inferior to you," she continued. "He was jealous of your leadership, and it bothered him. So he came up with a plan to frame you for stealing from the company. We opened a new bank account in your name, drained it, and made sure you were financially ruined. We knew you'd trust me completely, and with you in prison, we thought we could disappear, far away where no one could find us." Her voice shook as she spoke, clearly struggling to accept the reality of what she'd done. "I know," I said, trying to mask the anger in my voice. "None of you cared that you were destroying me in the process." Kelly nodded sadly. "At first, I didn't want to, but Roger wore me down. For our plan to work, you had to be completely broken, without questioning anything. And we almost succeeded," I interrupted. "If it weren't for Detective Roundlight and Mira, you might have gotten away with it." We sat in silence for a moment. Then Kelly asked softly, "Can I see them?" She meant my scars. Slowly, I placed my hands on the table, palms up. Kelly gasped as she looked at my hands, her tears starting to fall. She reached for them, but pulled back. I sat there, expressionless, but inside I felt a mix of anger, shame, and confusion. There was still a small part of me that felt love for her despite everything. But I didn't want to admit it. I must not have hidden my emotions well because Kelly looked at me intensely. "I'm so sorry, Bart. I'm ashamed of what I forced you to do. I'm accepting 20 years without appeal. I deserve it for what I did to you." I nodded, relieved that she was accepting her punishment. She looked at me again. "Bart, you've never been a bad lover. You're amazing compared to Roger. I have no excuse for what I did to you that morning. I was wrong." We sat in silence for a moment before Kelly asked, "So, you and Mira?" "Yes," I replied a little hesitantly. She smiled faintly. "Okay, you know she's loved you for years," Kelly said almost casually. "I found out recently," I answered. Kelly's voice grew soft and bittersweet. "Let her love you, Bart. Let her heal the pain I caused. She's everything I'm not." I didn't know what to say. "Don't worry," she said, wiping away her tears. "I'll be fine. I agreed to your terms. I was surprised you were generous enough to manage my money while I'm in prison. You're a better person than I ever imagined." I sighed. "Kelly, I once loved you more than you'll ever understand. If you'd been honest with me, maybe we could have avoided all of this. But I'm trying to forget what you did to me. I'm still angry, though. I want to scream at you, even hurt you for what you put me through. But I can't. I have to live with it." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, Kelly said quietly, "I'm sorry for what I did to you. You deserved better. And I know I pushed you further than I ever should have. If we're honest, I'll always be ashamed of what happened." "I saw the letter you wrote," she added softly. "You're right. I'll burn for what I did, but I'm thankful you're alive." I clenched my jaw. The feelings were still strong. How could Kelly say all of this now after everything? How could she try to take away the anger I was holding on to? It didn't feel fair. I decided to change the subject. "I offered to take care of your money out of respect for the years we shared. You'll have enough when you get out to start fresh, if that's what you choose," I said, trying to hide my emotions but failing. Kelly saw right through my weak attempt, yet, with a bitter laugh, she went along with the change of subject. "I'll probably be over 60 by then. Hopefully that'll be enough to retire." "60 isn't that old," I said. "Keep yourself in shape, and you'll be strong into your 80s. We chatted a bit longer about how she wanted updates on her funds. It eased some of the tension, but I sensed she was about to change the topic again. "Have you talked to Grace?" she asked, hesitating slightly. I shook my head. "Grace basically told me to get lost, that I was dead to her. She believed all the lies you and your lover fed her. That conversation broke me. I looked at Kelly and she winced when she saw the pain in my eyes. Kelly, she never even asked me if I was guilty. She didn't give herself any reason to doubt. She just tossed me aside, without even looking at me. Right after that, I stood up abruptly, turning away so Kelly wouldn't see me crying. If I had looked at her while I cried, I would have seen Kelly crying too. She knew I couldn't bear to see that. Turning my back to her, I continued. When I was in the hospital, Mira tried to reach out to her, but nothing. Then, like Kelly had earlier, I wiped my face with my sleeve and sat back down, as Kelly tried to wipe the tears from her face. "I'm sorry, Bart," Kelly winced. "A lot of it was part of a plan Roger and I put together, to my eternal shame. We've set it up so Grace would turn against you." I nodded. Kelly saw the flash of anger in my eyes as she confessed, hanging her head in shame. I could have let the anger build for how she ruined my relationship with my daughter, but Kelly admitted it openly. "If it helps at all," Kelly said sadly, "Grace cut me out too. I haven't been told off like that since I was a child, but I know I deserve it." "Bart," Kelly said suddenly, her tone shifting from sadness to urgency, "our little girl needs you. She's scared, and she's pushing everyone away. Right now, she and John are fighting about everything. You know it's not really about them, right?" Kelly said more calmly. "I worry about her. It's my fault, but I can't fix it. I know she feels guilty about how she treated you, but not talking to her just makes it worse. I know I have no right to ask this." Kelly hesitated, wringing her hands as she looked at me. "But could you find it in yourself to forgive Grace? Our daughter needs at least one parent. I know that even if I hadn't spent all that time in prison, my guilt over what I did to you and turning Grace against you would have eaten me alive. And in the end, she'd still hate me." Kelly snorted. "It'll be better. It'll be better if you're the one who takes care of her. If you died, I don't know what she would have done. Please, Bart, take care of our daughter," my ex-wife pleaded with me. "Kelly," I took a deep breath, struggling to find the right words. "What you're asking is hard. You caused me a lot of pain, but you were my wife, not my blood. When Grace told me she never wanted to see me again, that I was dead to her, remember, not even a day had passed since you told me to die. That hurt more than what you did. I want to get back to her, but the pain, Kelly, the pain of what my family did to me, what our daughter did, it's overwhelming. I don't know how to deal with it." Kelly nodded. "I understand," she said softly, knowing I was struggling. But I still had a lot of healing to do. She understood the rejection. She was living through it now. I sighed, looking at my ex-wife. "Look, Kelly, no matter how tough it gets, I'm going to try not to hate you. I'm getting help. But even with that, it takes everything I have not to scream at you. And I can't promise anything about Grace, but I'll think about talking to her soon." She looked crushed. Throughout our conversation, Kelly seemed to have aged. There was nothing left to say. She stood up. "Bart, I know this doesn't mean much to you right now, but I'll say it again. I'm sorry for everything I did to you. I have no excuse, and I know I can never make it right. I'll do my time, and though I may never earn it, I'll hope one day you can forgive me." Kelly sniffled and looked at me, her age now showing clearly. "You may not believe me, but I still love you and always will. I lost sight of it for a while, but I remember now." We stood there, awkwardly silent as Kelly's tears flowed again. She walked to the door and knocked. Prison convoy opened it. She paused and turned to me. "Love Mira, Bart. Give her the love I wasted. Live well and always know people care about you. There's always someone who'll help you rise again, even in your darkest moments. I missed it, but I'm proud of you, Bart. You found yourself again. Goodbye, my beautiful man." "I'll never forget you," Kelly said with regret. As she left, I thought about our conversation. There were no screams. Kelly had taken responsibility and accepted her sentence. I stood and noticed small drops of water on the tile floor where she'd walked. I turned away, mourning briefly for the past, then left the room. When I was led out into the public gallery, my mood lifted at the sight of Mira waiting for me. Even on this occasion, my assistant-turned-girlfriend looked stunning, though her outfit still carried a touch of seductiveness. Her blonde hair cascaded down her back as she kissed me. "Everything go well?" she asked. "Yes," I replied. It was surprising. I expected anger and accusations, but she took most of the blame and showed real remorse. "What do you think?" Mira asked. I paused, still holding her. "I'm still angry at Roger and Kelly, but I pity her. She knows she ruined everything and is paying the price. Grace cut her out for it." Mira nodded. "John and Grace are here. While you were with Kelly, John told me they'll be at the cafe across the street in a few hours. He knows you're upset and Grace really wants to see you." I took a deep breath and looked at Mira. "You think I should talk to her?" I asked. She nodded. "Yes, my love. There's a pain inside you that only Grace can heal. If you want, I'll go with you. I'll be by your side." She smiled. And if I need to step in, I will. I kissed her. I love you too, Mira. Her eyes widened. It was my first public declaration of love, and though people noticed, I didn't care. We walked hand in hand across the street to the cafe. As we entered, we saw Grace, torn between running away and hugging me. I opened my arms, and she ran to me, crying into my shirt. "I'm sorry, Daddy," she whispered over and over. After a few minutes, I gently pulled her back, and we sat down. Drinks and food were ordered, and it was time to begin. "I just spoke with your mother," I said quietly. Grace nodded. "I know. Dad, I'm so sorry," she said, straightening up. "I didn't give you a chance to explain. I should have let you talk. I can't blame Roger or Mom for everything. They told me so many lies. But they were convincing. When you called, I said awful things I regret." She glanced at Mira. "Mom, with Roger's help, made me believe you were deceitful. I thought Mira was part of your plan, just seeking attention." She paused. "But it's clear you tried." She couldn't finish, and none of us could speak the unspoken. "Sorry, Gracie," I said. "I was in a bad place and didn't see a way out," I added, and Grace broke down again, burying her face in her hands. Mira melted beside me, both of us overwhelmed. For a few moments, no one spoke. John looked at us and then smiled. "I don't want to downplay this, but I think we should cut Grace some slack and calm down." He gestured toward Mira and me. "Can I assume something good came out of all this?" Grace looked up, her eyes wide. "Dad, you and Mira?" she asked, surprised. "Yes," I nodded. "But it wasn't an affair. As your mom told you, I never cheated. When I woke up in the hospital, Mira was there, refusing to leave. She even believed what your mom and Roger said for a while, but over time, I realized how much she cared about me." Grace looked at us, then regained her composure. "Thank you," she said to Mira. "Thank you for being there for Dad when I was being an idiot." Mira laughed, lightening the mood. Over the next few hours, we talked, sometimes personally, sometimes as a group. At one point, I asked Grace to switch places with Mira so my daughter could hug me. While it didn't heal everything, it marked the start of rebuilding our relationship. Grace even came to counseling with me several times. My therapist helped us work through the trust issues we hadn't resolved since our first meeting in the cafe. One difficult session was when I asked Grace not to cut her mom completely out of her life. Kelly had done a lot of harm, but she was still her mother. Grace agreed to meet her, but only if I went with her. It was a tough meeting with little said, but Grace made an effort. The next week, Kelly wrote to me, admitting she was a fool and apologizing. 6 months later, I proposed to Mira during a family dinner. Tilly and Grace encouraged me, and John gave me a smile and a handshake. Mira later asked Kelly for permission to take on the role of mother of the bride, which Kelly reluctantly granted. Tilly was beautiful as the flower girl and proudly announced she was my second daughter. That day, I stopped being Uncle Bart and became a dad. When I walked Grace down the aisle and gave her to her husband, I felt all the past tensions ease. During our father-daughter dance, she whispered a prayer of thanks. That night, any remaining hesitation I had about Grace disappeared. Grace later sent Kelly photos and a letter thanking her for allowing Mira to stand in for her. I know Kelly keeps them on her phone. After the Roger Kelly case settled, Reagan secured a significant payout for both Mira and me. Clarence initially refused to offer anything, but a week before the court date, he made a low offer, which Reagan rejected. 2 days before the trial, he made another offer, which was again rejected. As a result, Mira received a high 6-figure payout, and I received a 7-figure settlement from the engineering company. The settlement was small compared to what a lawsuit would have cost, but it still impacted Clarence. His income dropped, and he sold the company for a fraction of its value. With the money from our settlements, Mira and I started our own engineering and consulting firm, providing expertise for major projects. 6 months later, we had a team of 5 traveling around the country. One of our first clients was Peter Pembroke. He invited us to dinner and apologized, admitting that the project would have failed without my skills. Every year after, we were invited to their events, even if we weren't working on their projects. Peter was a good guy who had been in a bad situation and wanted to make things right. We sold Mira's small house and bought a much larger one with a stunning view of Kings Park. It was an old house with 5 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms, and we spent over 2 years restoring it. Life was good. We celebrated family milestones, including Grace and Tilly's new brother, Byron. Though I still had occasional bad dreams, Mira was always there, my rock, whenever I needed her. More than 10 years later, Byron was no longer the precocious 10-year-old he once was. Tilly, following in Aunt Reagan's footsteps, was studying law at university. It was a lazy Saturday afternoon when Grace casually mentioned her mother. "Dad, I got a letter from Mom this week," Grace said, carefully but calmly. Kelly wasn't a taboo topic, but everyone spoke cautiously around her. Over the years, I had received letters from Kelly and even visited her in prison. She was still serving her sentence, but had earned respect as a model prisoner. What did she write? I asked. She mentioned that Roger was released last month, Grace replied, as everything quieted down. Was I drinking Kraken and Coke last month? I asked, concerned. Mira placed her hand over mine. Did she say anything else? She asked. Grace nodded. Mom said Roger came to see her. She said he looked bad and wasn't at peace. It wasn't a calm conversation. I'll visit her next week to get more details. We discussed it briefly before I excused myself and called David Roundlight, now a close friend. He led a team investigating major crimes and often solved complex cases. Bart, how's everything? How's Mira? He asked cheerfully when he picked up. Mira's great, I replied, then hesitated. David, I just found out Roger's been released. I could sense David's mood shift. Yes, I got the report yesterday. I was going to tell you at the bowling alley next week, he said. From the report, it seems Rogers moved to Adelaide and got a job there. The committee asked him about you, and he said you could rot in hell, but he knew he had to leave because of his record. I sighed. Peter said life in prison was tough for him. I don't think we'll have any problems with him. Thanks, Bart, David replied. But that's what worries me. I'll let you know if I hear anything, I said, exhaling a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. We talked briefly about bowling and an upcoming barbecue. When I returned to the table, Mira looked at me. David? She asked. I nodded. He confirmed Roger's release and moved to Adelaide, but he still hates me. I think the feeling's mutual, I told the family. The rest of the day was quiet, but being with my family helped me feel supported. That night I woke up sweating and screaming from a nightmare, the first I'd had in years. Mira immediately woke up, concerned. Without asking, she called my therapist, who kindly answered at 2 a.m. That's why we pay him so much, I joked as Mira held me tightly. While it upset her, just saying it helped me feel better. My therapist explained that the dream was likely triggered by the news of Roger's release, bringing back old anxiety. We agreed to meet again, and I thanked him for taking my call so early. Once we were settled, Mira checked on Byron, who was still sleeping. Tilly woke up, went back to bed, and asked her mother to tell me she loved me. After using the bathroom, I lay back down, and Mira cuddled against me. Do you really think there will be problems with Roger? She asked. I don't know, I replied. I think he'll disappear, and we won't hear from him. And even if we do, we have protection. I nodded toward our hunting gear safely stored in the closet. Mira nodded back. I'm sorry hearing this upset you. Are you okay? She asked. Sort of, I answered. I think there will always be a shadow over me. I don't dwell on those times anymore, but it's part of who I am. I hug the woman I loved so much. But when I think about it, I fixate on the beautiful blonde who saved my life. Mira lifted her head and looked at me. I'm serious, I said. I felt so helpless back then. I thought the only way out was to end it all. I could have done it again if you hadn't been there when I woke up. I realized that ignoring the past wouldn't help. The best I could do was surround myself with the people I love, focusing on what I'm grateful for and talking to them when I need to, so I don't slip back into that dark place. Mira nodded. I love you, Bart, she said. I love you too, Mira, I replied. With those words, we fell asleep. Life wasn't perfect. There were disagreements and nightmares, but through it all, I had the love of a woman who made everything possible, friends who accepted me, and a family that stood by me through life's storms.